Chapter 191 Surprise Appearance. Over at Zhou Yixian's side, they rested and treated Wild Dog. Wild Dog, after knowing he was pulled back from hell, felt really fortunate, secretly felt confused over his brave acts at that time. But whatever it was, after that, Zhou Yixian and Xiao Huan's relationships with Wild Dog Taoist became closer. After all, they had been through life and death together. Zhou Yixian was not as cold to Wild Dog as in the past. However, he was still the same when he was ordering Wild Dog to do tasks, but as Wild Dog Taoist was still recovering from his injuries, Zhou Yixian instead had to do more, as such again making the old man grumbled and complained. But Xiao Huan and Wild Dog were still the same as before, but Wild Dog Taoist looked even more nervous than before when he was before Xiao Huan, and spoke lesser to her. Although it was puzzling, but Xiao Huan did not sense it. Those days her attention was mostly on that strange book with black wordless cover. Wild Dog Taoist had never seen Xiao Huan read that book before, felt rather bewildered, but Xiao Huan never revealed the origin of this book. Zhou Yixian also did not explain. As time passed, he too slowly got used to it, just that occasionally felt that Xiao Huan looked different. Gradually, she seemed different somehow, but he was unable to put a finger to it. XXX. The demon beast catastrophe started from the middle of southern border 10,000's great mountains. The first to suffer would also be southern border. The torments that those various tribes suffered, compared to central plains, were far more serious. 9 out of 10 houses were empty. That was almost the inevitable end for many of the villages and towns. Even for an entire village with no survivors, that was also frequent. After the catastrophe, the remaining small groups of demon beasts in southern border were much more than those in central plains. The people who survived had to endure the demons' harassments. That kind of life was really dark days, like in an abyss of suffering. Ghost Li, in that kind of situation, once again set foot onto southern border vast land. Along the way, he did not discover any traces of the demons but saw numerous swarms of good faction members, among them also including Qingyun, Fenchong, etc., those great sects. Those people were like berserk, all looking for the beast deity, but very obviously, so many of them searching but none found him. After defeated in Qingyun battle, the beast deity escaped with serious injuries and seemed to disappear into thin air. No one could find him. But this southern border 10,000's great mountains was still his home. No matter what, he would eventually come back, right? With that thought, Ghost Li entered southern border. Also entering the southern border were also numerous good faction disciples. Fenchong Valley sect was back to their home ground, but for the other good faction disciples, naturally they were not only there to eliminate the remaining demon beasts. But no matter what, because of those people, the remaining fearless demons temporarily exercised restraint. These good faction disciples, after all, to the best of their abilities, eliminated those demons. As such, the mood in different areas of the southern border also received a boost. Just that nobody saw even the shadow of the beast deity in the southern border realm. Now the only possibility was only within that barren mountains and unruly rivers, strange and mysterious 10,000's great mountains. In the layers and layers of dark mountains ranges, nobody knew how much secrets it concealed. Ghost Li, before entering the mountains, first went to the southern border Miao tribe 7 Miles Cave, for no other reason than because of what the great shaman did for Bai Yao. He also wanted to offer his respect. Tian Shui Stockade, 7 Miles Cave. Walking along the route, the original bustling scenes were gone, tragic scenes along the way. Even his hardened heart also could not help but be moved. What was it for that resulted in such a great calamity? His own cultivation achieved results. In the huge waves of wickedness he stayed out of it, but what about the countless of commoners who suffered? What did they do wrong? Why must they suffer such calamity? Recalling his days at Tianyin Temple, the countless of commoners day and night prayed to the gods and Buddhas. Looking at the world, there were much more people who also did that, prostrated and worshipped to the heavens deities. But when the catastrophe came, who helped them? And so, was there still a use for that kind of worship? Or should it be said, it was really a response to the mysterious words which consistently appeared throughout the less than Tianshu greater than. Heaven and earth heartless, treats all living things as straw dogs. XXX. Stepping into 7 Miles Cave, Ghost Li sucked in a breath of cold air. This place, which was once a picturesque scenery in his memory, was already devastated and ruined beyond recognition. The undulating rows of houses only almost left broken walls. The usual crowded streets were gone, not to mention kids running around. The number of remaining people looked to be only 1 or 2 out of 10. Most were standing before the houses, despondently trying to salvage usable things from the ruins. However, more often than not, what they could find were only the remains of the deceased. In the entire 7 miles cave, a sad and decayed atmosphere permeated the air. Occasionally few children, staring blankly, their eyes dazed and full of fear, appeared in the next moment. There would be an adult appearing behind, pulling them back in. Ghostly slowly walked along the street. Soon that attracted some of the Miao tribe people's attention, their eyes, thick with worry. In the unusual atmosphere, even Xiao Wei seemed to turn much obedient, although it was still peering around. Ghostly secretly sighed, did not wish to see any more, quickened his pace, straight to that altar up the mountain. As he walked further in, the surrounding houses and roads clearly revealed even more the extent of the destructions. Ghostly was silent, vaguely saw the traces of that fateful day when the catastrophe arrived, the countless Miao tribe warriors battling the vicious demons in order to protect the holy ground, putting up a desperate fight. Even the air seemed to be permeated with a faint smell of blood. At the foot of the mountain, 2 young Miao soldiers stopped him. Ghostly quietly stopped, looked at them, those 2 people, armed with spears and armors, but they were only 15, 16-year-old boys only. Even their armors looked larger than their bodies, not knowing if those were left behind by the once heroic warriors. Ji Yu Lu Ji Ji Hu? A man asked in Miao language. Ghostly did not understand but surmised what he was asking, and so did not speak, only lifted his head and gestured to the mid-mountains. He did not use his fingers, because he still remembered, Miao people regarded that behavior as disrespectful. The 2 juveniles were startled a moment, looked at each other, then one of them, who appeared older, shook his head. Both of them did not make way. Ghostly felt slightly anxious but really did not wish to pick a fight with the great shaman tribe people, and after watching the devastating scene in the 7 miles, he couldn't bear to make a move. He was silent for a long time. When the hostility in the eyes of those 2 teenagers increased, he sighed, turned and was about to leave. But he had only taken a few steps when suddenly, there was a stir from the mountains. He turned around and looked. Someone quickly ran down from the mountain, first spoke in Miao language to the 2 teenagers. The 2 young men nodded a few times, stood to the side. Then, the person, who looked to be a priest aged around 40 or so, used broken Central Plains language to speak to Ghostly. "Hello, Great Shaman invites you up." Ghostly was surprised, frowned. "Great Shaman?" The man nodded. Ghostly took a deep breath, nodded his head and followed the man up the mountain. The cave was still there, but the entrance architecture and altar were beyond recognition. Broken stones fragments littered everywhere. Among the rocks, there was a young Miao person, looked to be only 30 or so, wearing the great shaman robes, smiled and watched Ghostly walked over. His eyes glistened faintly, like a passion of flames burning within it, completely different from the people below. Ghostly went before him. That young man smiled, surprisingly used fluent Central Plains language, said, "Hello, Mr. Ghostly, I am Southern Border Miao tribe, new generation of great shamans. I have long heard of your great name." Ghostly was stunned for a moment, nodded in return. Before he could speak, that young great shaman had already smiled and said, "Come on in, I'll take you to see the previous great shaman." Then he took the lead and walked into the dim cave. Ghostly followed behind him and 2 slowly merged into the darkness. The cave was still as dim. The young shaman figure wavered slightly ahead. For some reason, Ghostly felt he looked familiar. Carefully recalling, he realized the great shaman had called out this young man when he was here the last time. Didn't expected that after such a short time, he already assumed the position of the great shaman. And like the last time, the young shaman brought Ghostly to the hut deep within the mountain which worshipped the dog deity. The huge fire was still burning, emitting crackling sounds, just that withered old figure was no longer around. The young man stepped forward, bowed respectfully towards the dog deity statue, and then from the statue's mouth, took out a wooden box, respectfully placed it on the ground and spoke to Ghostly. "Our Miao people customs, after the death of the great shaman, under the dog deity status, to be worshipped for a year. This is the elder's ashes." Ghostly was silent, looked at the small wooden box. The box was unadorned, not a single embellishment. Even the wood used was also from the most commonly seen trees in Southern Border. The great shaman, like numerous Miao people, laid quietly here in peace. Ghostly bent his body, made a deep bow. The monkey Xiao Wei, with a jeet sound, jumped down, ran off by itself. The young shaman, in accordance with their customs, also bowed to return the gesture and then carefully placed the simple wooden box into the statue mouth again. The 2 people beside the fire sat on the floor, the fire reflected in their eyes, dazzling in the darkness. Without waiting for Ghostly to ask, the young man had already spoken. "I was the elder's disciple, and after the terrible calamity, all of the senior priests were dead, and so, I succeeded the great shaman position. Ghostly silently nodded, his eyes subconsciously looked over to the dog deity, slowly said, the great shaman could be said he died because of me, each time I think of that, I don't feel good. That young shaman bowed slightly, said, you are wrong, teacher had said to me long before, he had reached the end of his lifespan, even if he did not go to the central plains, he would also die, in fact it is your honorable sect who sent teacher's ashes back, this is already our entire Meow tribe's fortune. Ghostly sighed, quietly said, these things were done by other sincere people, it has nothing to do with me. The young great shaman smiled, apparently did not mind Ghostly's words, said, but your visit this time to our 7 Miles cave, I do not know what is the reason for it. Ghostly said, actually it is not for any reason, I just wanted to offer my respect to the senior great shaman. Other than that, the calamity this time is so devastating, as for that chief culprit, I intend to pursue him, I wonder if you have any clues. The young shaman's countenance changed slightly, clearly to him, beast deity these two words were still horrible and taboo. Very quickly he became quiet, after a long while, Ghostly indifferently said, you don't have to mind, countless number of people in the world are also looking for him, and might not even find him, it is not strange that you don't know too. I am disturbing you here, so I will take my leave first. When he finished, he was about to get up, the young shaman looked hesitant, suddenly said, you want to track the beast deity, is that true? Ghostly said, yes. The young shaman stared at him and said, you can kill him. Ghostly was silent for a long time, said, I am not sure. The young shaman pondered for a moment, said, since that is so, I will tell you what I know. I do not know how to find the beast deity, but in my tribe's ancient legend, the beast deity is a devil-like monster, he cannot be killed, and only can be subdued and sealed like what our shaman goddess did thousands of years ago. In order to suppress him, you will need to remove our southern border tribe's divine weapons from his body. The 5 divine weapons are the life sources of the beast demon, if he loses them, the beast demon will definitely go into a deep sleep. In addition, there is a critical point, at that time when the beast demon was wreaking havoc, his demon powers powerful and invincible, thanks to our shaman goddess who used the mysterious formation passed down in our shaman tribe, 8 Savage Inferno formation, trapped it within, if you can find the formation, perhaps. Ghostly slowly nodded. The young shaman thought for a moment, and said, how to find the beast demon, I really have no idea, but according to our tribe legend, when shaman goddess trapped and sealed the beast, it was deep inside the 10,000 great mountains, an ancient mountain cave named Subdue Devil Cave. And the legend also said that our goddess turned into a stone statue, facing the ancient cave, maybe when you find such a place, there will be the beast demon's tracks. Ghostly remembered it all, nodded to the young shaman, said, thank you. The great shaman smiled, and did not say anything. When the two of them walked out of the cave, Ghostly could not help but ask him, why did he not have grief in his eyes? That young shaman paused, lightly said, if I lose myself in my grief again, what will happen to the people in the 7 Miles cave? It is not that I am not grieving, it is that I cannot be sad. Ghostly, after listening, was silent for a long time before he took his leave. XXX. After leaving the cave, Ghostly did not hurry, slowly traveled, thought long on the young shaman words, that, 8 Savage Inferno formation, made him thought of another person, Xiaobai. That day she left in anger, and from then on there was no news of her, although with her level of skills, there was nothing much to worry about but thinking about the reason for her departure, most likely it was to find that, 8 Savage Inferno formation, Ghostly felt somehow guilty. The sinister orb had troubled him for many years, but some time ago at Tianyin Temple wordless Jade Wall. He achieved enlightenment from the 4th volume of the less than Tian Shu greater than, combining the sinister orb's evil powers with Buddhist, Taoist, evil 3 great sects' true ways, even including the mysterious Inferno Mirror's pure yang power, indistinctly peeped into the source of all sects' power. The sinister orb's evil power to him, with his cultivation advanced improvement, was no longer a serious concern to his life. Just that, for some reasons, following the enlightenment at the wordless Jade Wall, he gradually got over many things that he never thought of in the past, also appeared in his memories. Xiaobai treated him so, most likely it wasn't entirely all because of her relationship with Bai Yao. She by herself, on the day the demon beast catastrophe was in full swing, returned to southern border to find the formation, the vast heaven and earth, and now not a single news from her. Ghostly felt an inexplicable pain when he thought of that, just that the heaven and earth was so vast, he really did not know where to start finding. Ghost Li contemplated for a long time, and finally decided to go secretly to Fenshang Valley first, for no other reason, firstly because he heard Xiao Bao once said, the formation appeared in Fenshang Valley Inferno Altar before. In that case, for Xiao Bai to find this formation, most likely she would go there, and even if she was not, taking a look for himself would be also good. His mind made up, Ghost Li headed to Fenshang Valley. Fenshang Valley was one of the three great good faction sects, just that in this calamity, it was the first to bear the brunt, happened to be at the entrance of the Demon Beasts massacre, just that although Fenshang Valley was wrecked but its disciples, nobody was hurt seriously. However, as a reputable sect of the good faction, with such results, inevitably they lost face, and after the catastrophe, many rumors and gossips spread around, implying Fenshang Valley disciples were cowards, as one of the leading good faction sect, actually did not dare to face the demon calamity by itself, instead hid behind Qingyun sect. Now that Qingyun sect Reverend Dao Zan in the world's good faction, was really of paramount importance, revered with great prestige, Fenshang Valley really pale in comparison. After which when crowds of good faction disciples entered the southern border to search for the beast deity, Fenshang Valley naturally would not want to lose out, but when they met each other, Fenshang Valley disciples had less of their arrogant attitude. But even it was so, Fenshang Valley was after all a famous sect, coupled with the fact that their real abilities were still there, although there were many rumors and gossips but nobody dared to insult them in their face. As for their valley, it was really in a mess, at least when Ghost Li sneaked in, what he saw was this. The original tranquil and beautiful valley was now filled with an unpleasant burnt smell and stench, countless disciples carrying and moving different rotting garbage and bodies, some were humans, many were also animals. Ghost Li secretly observed, after pondering for a moment, he already understood, that day when he sneaked into the valley late in the night, he was discovered in the end, it wasn't because the disciples were all highly skilled, it was because of the many strange creatures that they reared, taking one unaware. But Yun Yilin was able to bring most of his disciples to Central Plains, he was unable to do that for the creatures, and when the catastrophe came, those extremely brutal demons flooded through here, those creatures unfortunately were unable to escape. After a long time, their corpses decayed, adding to the stench. But right now without those creatures, it was beneficial to Ghost Li, at least he did not have to worry, in the corners of those rooms, which creature would suddenly sound the alarm, exposing him. Fenshang Valley disciples were many but most were dispatched to search for the beast deity, what most good faction sects wanted, how could Fenshang Valley not want it too? The remaining disciples, most were disgruntled and doing cleaning, even if there were some elders in the valley but like Yun Yilin, Shengguan See these kind of figures, they would not patrol the valley all the time. Ghost Li without encounter any difficulties, sneaked into the valley. At the moment it was only evening, much brighter than that time when he was here, but after sneaking in, he did not know how easy it would be. Ghost Li after entering the valley, did not do much, headed straight to the Inferno Altar direction. That day when Xiao Bai was incarcerated, that formation was also there. But the place was after all a sacred area, in such a hectic situation, Inferno Altar's security seemed to be even tighter than before, not knowing if it was because of Xiao Bai's escape and outsiders sneaking in. Just that with Ghost Li's current cultivation, although the security was tight but Ghost Li carefully infiltrated in, finally swept into the majestic Inferno Altar. And as he expected, although the security was tight outside, nobody was guarding inside. A quick glance, the place looked to be the same as previously, the floor still had the strange dark red formation, deeply engraved into the ground. Ghost Li comprehended, this was the legendary mysterious 8 Savage Inferno formation. But the day when Ghost Li and Xiao Bai escaped, the magma eruption that they triggered, the damage was still faintly visible. Burnt black areas on the walls, places where the stones collapsed, even the formation on the ground, some areas were slightly deformed by the intense fire. But if this was a commonplace, in that kind of disaster it would long be destroyed. The surrounding areas were still generally intact, it seemed like the formation using its special powers saved this place. Looking up, the second, third level secret traps had lost their effectiveness, opening just like that, revealing empty, dark black holes. The entire majestic altar, reflected in the faint fire, only Ghost Li's figure was gently wavering. Ghost Li was silent for a long time, shook his head, went to the formation and carefully looked, saw all of the ferocious deities still looked the same in his memory, portrayed clearly and lifelike, and the patterns connecting these figures were still as complicated and strange. Ghost Li took a deep breath, sat down cross-legged in this formation. Just when he was about to meditate on this legendary shaman formation, Suddenly, in the silent and uncanny altar, the darkness ahead of him, a clear and reverberating woman's laughter was heard. Ghost Li's countenance changed, stood up abruptly, looked up and blurted out, "Is it you, Xiao Bai?" His voice came to a halt, a figure drifted down from the top, a familiar light yellow clothing, bright and soft eyes, one look and one would be drunk in her beauty. It was a person he would never dreamed of meeting, that girl who was rumored to be dead in the catastrophe, Jin Pinger. XXX. After the initial shock, Ghost Li quickly calmed down. Jin Pinger was still standing there, as if nothing had changed. Her clothes, face and expression, even her lips, still had that faint and coquettish smile. She looked at Ghost Li, smiled and said, "Hello." Ghost Li looked at her silently, after a long time said, "Why are you here?" Jin Pinger, using her hand to gently brush her hair, the little action, as if contained infinite amorous feelings, softly said, "I am here waiting for you." Ghost Li frowned and said, "Waiting for me? For what? How do you know I will come here?" Jin Pinger smiled and said, "Don't tell me you have forgotten. The last time you were here, was together with me. I heard that this time you are tracking the beast deity. According to the southern borders legend, in order to subdue and seal the deity, naturally the formation is required. Other than not coming here, where can you go?" She squinted her eyes slightly, maybe there was a slight arrogant, and an unspoken seduction, smiled said, "You see, am I smart?" Ghost Li frowned, felt that after his skills improved, with Jin Pinger's seduction, he still felt slightly moved, he could not help but was secretly shocked. After the catastrophe, the girl who was rumored to be dead, seemed to improve in her skills instead. Since she was not dead, then the others, the evil sect martial experts who were crushed in the calamity. Don't tell him they did not die too. Ghost Li's heart was bewildered but his face was still cold. He said, "You still have not answered me, why are you waiting for me?" Jin Pinger smiled coquettishly, her indifferent tone instead uttered shocking words, "I know the location of the subdued devil cave where the beast deity was sealed in. After Ghost King sect leader knew about this, he allowed me to come and assist you." Ghost Li's body received a great shock, suddenly looked up, looked over at Jin Pinger, but her eyes were like water, her smile like flower, not the slightest unusual. Chapter 192 Fresh Blood. Ghost Li watched Jin Pinger for a long time, his eyebrows slowly frowning but he did not speak, and Jin Pinger under Ghost Li's stare, looked unconcerned, did not feel that her words were inappropriate at this moment, smiling sweetly and looking at Ghost Li. In the Inferno altar, the place turned quiet. Xiao Wei who was crouching at Ghost Li's shoulder did not like the atmosphere and moved. Gigi called out twice, leapt down from his shoulder, peering around, it then walked off by itself, slowly to the drawings in the middle of the altar. Ghost Li slowly looked away, saw Xiao Wei who was crouching on the floor curiously and looking at those ferocious drawings, slowly said, "So, you already much of it." Jin Pinger smiled, that smile was warm like spring wind, gently brushing past this cold hall, said, "I am a small and weak woman, how would I know anything? I am only fortunate to have visited a few places in the past, and also received Ghost King sect head's important regard, that's I came to assist you." Pursing her lips and smiling, she said, "Don't think too much." Ghost Li frowned and did not speak, even more so ignored the indistinct flirtatious tone in Jin Pinger's words. After contemplating for a moment, he seemed to forget the reason why Jin Pinger was here, and also the intricate and mysterious relationship between her and Ghost King, only indifferently said, "Since it is so, then I must ask for your guidance." Jin Pinger's eyes glimmered but the smile on her face remained, said, "Gongzi please speak." Ghost Li said, "Looks like you are here before me. Like what you said, the legend said in order to subdue the beast deity, the 8 Savage Inferno formation, here is vital, just that I have dull wits and can't figure it out. I wonder if Miss Jin has some comprehension." Jin Pinger shook her head, a bitter smile on her face, said, "To tell you the truth, actually I have been in Inferno altar for 3 days but I end up empty-handed, other than those messy drawings engraved on the ground, I did not discover anything else." Ghost Li's gaze couldn't help but shifted to the dark red drawings under his feet. Different from Jin Pinger, including Xiao Wei, he had experienced the power of that strange formation, that overwhelming force, and the terrible red huge beast, were all memories that were not easy to forget. Or maybe it was because of that, Xiao Wei excitedly lay on the ground, scratching there, touching here, seemed to be searching for something. Unless after that earth-shaking event, the volcano lava eruption, actually destroyed the formation here. The thought flashed past Ghost Li's head but he did not reveal it out. After keeping silent for a moment, he again looked at Jin Pinger, said, "Miss Jin, no matter what, this is the only place we know that has the 8 Savage Inferno Formation. Since this is vital to subdue the beast deity, why don't we stay a few more days here, maybe there is still some hope. Jin Pinger smiled sweetly, extremely coquettishly, said, all right. Ghostly glanced at her and then looked away, again sat down before the drawings. Not long after, a whiff of faint fragrance came over, light clothes fluttered, it was Jin Pinger who sat down not far from him, and the distance between them seemed to be nearer. Ghostly's frowned but he did not speak and also did not look at the beauty beside him, only watched closely at the drawings. For some reason, in his heart, another thought came up. That day Xiao Bai said she was going to southern border to search for the 8 Savage Inferno Formation, incantation, but it had been a long time since there was any news of her. And in the whole world it seemed like only this place has the 8 Savage Inferno Formation, but Xiao Bai evidently was not here. Then, where would she be right now? Is she still doing fine? This vague thought, in the coming days, frequently flashed past Ghostly's head. XXX. However, it seemed like on that day, the damage was much bigger than what Ghostly's assumed, even though those engravings on the ground still looked intact, but it clearly did not have that spiritual energy as before, or that powerful vicious force. What was left was only the stiff stone engravings. Ghostly and Jin Pinger stayed secretly in the Inferno altar for a total of 7 days, trying to figure it out, but still nothing. In between, Fenshang Valley disciples came in to conduct checks. A few times Shangguan Ce also personally brought men to do the rounds, but the Ghostly today, including Jin Pinger, their skills had already improved tremendously. They concealed themselves above in the dim Inferno altar and easily escaped detection. Just that in the end they were still unable to grasp the essentials of the formation. It was really troubling. This day, the two of them sat facing those stiff drawings for an afternoon. Suddenly, Jin Pinger stretched, her slim waist looking like a seductive snake, an alluring image. Even though the only man beside her stared intently on the floor carvings, thinking hard, did not notice Jin Pinger's lithe and graceful dance at all. Jin Pinger softly humphed, glared at Ghostly. Her eyes seemed to have a trace of complicated emotion, but that was only a flash. The next moment, she sighed and said, "Are you able to tell anything from it?" Ghostly's body moved, then slowly focused back, turned and glanced at Jin Pinger, shook his head, said, "You." Jin Pinger did not answer and only laughed bitterly, but Ghostly already understood. Jin Pinger frowned and said, "We have looked at these ghostly things for 7 days. In the 7 days, we did all we could, but not to say activating this formation, even trying to stir some figures up seemed impossible. What exactly happened here?" Ghostly, after being silent for a moment, looked up into the darkness above, said, "That day when I was here rescuing someone, I triggered the mechanism in this hall. The 8 Savage Inferno Formation was immediately activated." But, his eyes glanced towards the middle of the hall, a strange tone in his words, said, "But that mechanism is already gone now." Jin Pinger looked towards the direction of his gaze and saw a small stone platform raised in the middle, but the stone was burnt black, congealed together into an ugly-looking form. How would it look like some superb craftsmanship mechanism? In fact, when Ghostly looked at that scene, he knew that strange stone mechanism was already destroyed, and the overwhelming fierce forces emitted by the ferocious stone engravings right now were all gone. The stretch of the once terrible carvings looked to have become lifeless things. The two of them sank into silence, not knowing what to say. After a long time, Jin Pinger seemed to think of something, raised her head and was about to speak. Suddenly her countenance changed. Ghostly's brows also frowned, suddenly turned. Immediately his eyes swept to where Xiao Wei was playing by itself, grabbed Xiao Wei and then floated up. The next moment, already disappeared into the darkness above the altar. Jin Pinger, after watching him disappearing into the darkness in 2 or 3 movements, smiled and then also floated up and disappeared. The next moment, Jia, a sound, deep muffled sound reverberated in the altar. The door was opened. Footsteps were heard. The number of people seemed to be a lot, but a powerful voice was heard indistinctly. After saying a few words, the place immediately quietened down. Then, from the door, 3 people walked in. The first person was Fenshang Valley Master Yun Yilan. Following behind him on his right was his junior brother Shangguan Ce, and the last person, about a few steps behind, was Yun Yilan's favorite disciple, Li Xuan. After the 3 of them entered, Li Xuan turned and closed the heavy door, immediately cut off the light outside. Only dim light gently flickered in there. XXX. Losing its spiritual power, the 3rd level of the Inferno altar, which was originally in ice, had long lost the bitter cold. What was left were only the huge and hard cold rocks. In the darkness, Ghostly and Jin Pinger quietly passed through that black cave hole, watching from above in the darkness. Xiao Wei, who seemed to know this was different, also turned quiet, obediently crouched beside its master. Yun Yilin and Shangguan Si slowly walked to the middle of the altar, stood at the formation and looked far, their faces enveloped in the dimness. The three people stood there, after a long period of silence, did not speak, the atmosphere indistinctly strange. And above them, Ghost Li seemed to sense it, glanced over at Jin Pinger and happened that Jin Pinger was also looking at him. Both saw the faint bewilderment in each other's eyes. Yun Yilin looked solemn, or maybe his mood should be so, whoever it was, after watching their own painstakingly built-up business over the years turned into this, most probably would also be in a bad mood. Just that at one glance his face seemed expressionless, after some time, it seemed to give people an impression that it's ever-changing, but if you watched carefully, again discovered, his face had never changed, what changed was only your heart. At least, during the time at Qingyun Hill, the world was not be able to see that image of him. After a long time, Yun Yilin's shifting gaze in the end maintained on the strange red stone, from one end to the other, from one drawing to another, and then, he slowly walked to that burnt stone platform, stretched out his hand and gently smoothed the rock. "How long has it been?" Yun Yilin suddenly spoke, his deep voice asking a question out of nowhere. Shangguan Si stood beside him. He did not look surprised by Yun Yilin's question, obviously he seemed to be already aware of some things, just that he looked like he did not intend to answer, and very strangely, turned and glanced at Li Xuan, who was standing 3 steps behind them. Li Xuan slowly lowered his head, his expression respectful, both of his eyes slightly closed, not making a sound. Without turning back, Yun Yilin seemed to know what was going on, indifferently said, "Zuner is not an outsider, in the future he will also take over Fenshong Valley, don't have to hide these things from him." Shangguan Si's body shook slightly and then calmed down, after a moment of silence, said, "From the start of the preparation for the official summoning, till today has already been a total of 30 days, Red Fire Brilliant Elder, never responded." Yun Yilin's expression did not change the slightest, the most only a glint in his eyes, but the feeling it gave others seemed to be heavier. And above the altar, Ghost Li was instead surprised, not that Fenshong Valley was also helpless in repairing this strange formation, but the Red Fire Brilliant Elder, which Shangguan Si had mentioned, triggered a memory deep inside his head, almost subconsciously, he felt that what Shangguan Si referred to was something. That huge wild beast enveloped in raging fire, could it be the crux of the legendary 8 Savage Inferno formation? The atmosphere in the altar was somehow strange. Yun Yilin did not look good, he did not speak, only strutted around with big steps in the hall, seemed to be pondering over something, and Shangguan Si only watched him, did not say anything. As for Li Xuan, he only maintained a humble posture and remained silent. Following the passing of time, Yun Yilin slowly frowned, a sharp glint indistinct in his eyes, as if something in his mind was having an intense fight, but eventually he abruptly stopped pacing. With a long breath he turned to them. Shangguan Si glanced at Yun Yilin, softly called out, "Senior brother." Yun Yilin seemed to make up his mind, without hesitation, coldly said, "Shangguan Junior brother, how important is this Inferno altar formation? I don't have to emphasize it, no matter what, it must be recovered, if not, we don't have any other way to deal with him." Shangguan Si nodded, did not speak, but in the darkness above the 3 of them, Ghost Li and Jin Pinger received a shock at the same time. Who was he? The person that Fenshong Valley wanted to use this strange formation to deal with, was who? In the quiet Inferno altar, what was flowing right now, seemed to be an invisible dark energy. Just that, what Yun Yilin was about to say, made the surrounding indistinct darkness, turned into cold icy chill. That day when the lava erupted, the damage caused to the formation was really too great. The spiritual energy that our Fenshong Valley has accumulated for several hundred years has depleted, including losing the key, Inferno Mirror. That's why we are unable to summon the Red Fire Brilliant Elder to activate the formation. Actually, if that person did not appear, this is naturally not important, we can start accumulating over again, but currently, it is the critical time to use this formation. Yun Yilin coldly snorted. 3 deep wrinkles appeared on his forehead, the murderous intention could be vaguely felt, his voice also became more cold. Shangguan Si was also deeply frowning, but a trace of delight was on his face, asked in surprise, "Why, don't tell me senior brother already has other ideas?" Yun Yilin's eyes twitched, said, "The formation in this altar is created by our sect ancestors following the records from the Fenshong Jade Book, which is passed down, and at the end of the Jade Book, a forefather had written some words which are the risky methods to deal with this kind of difficult situation where the formation is unable to be activated. Maybe it will work." Shangguan Ce and Li Xuan were surprised and then delighted. Fenshang Jade Book was Fenshang Valley's supreme treasure, and all along only Fenshang Valley Master was able to read and keep it. To Yun Yilan, it must be an exceptional forefather who left the ingenious method. Shangguan Ce delightfully said, "Senior brother, what is the ingenious method left by that forefather?" Yun Yilan saw their excitement but his face did not show any delight. Instead, he was even more solemn. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "That forefather wrote at the end of the Fenshang Jade Book. Inferno formation is created out of heaven and earth's vicious energies, the red fire beast brutal and ferocious, the spiritual energy that the engraved drawings contained, are the 8 barbarian ferocious deities, with such it is recommended to reference southern border ancient books, with live humans as blood sacrifice, using the prosperous vicious energies to return the various deities back to position, the ferocious beast will appear and complete the formation." Shangguan Ce and Li Xuan's countenances changed greatly, looked at each other, for a moment speechless. After a long time, Shangguan Ce forced himself to calm down from the shock, with a hoarse voice said, This is really what our sect forefather wrote." Yun Yilan snorted, said, "Shangguan junior brother, don't tell me you suspect I use our forefather's name as a pretext." Shangguan Ce's countenance changed again, quickly said, "I don't dare, just that using humans as blood offering, it is clearly evil sect ways, how is it possible for it to appear in our sect Jade Book?" Yun Yilan directly interrupted Shangguan Ce's words, coldly said, "What you said is right, this forefather although wrote such words but never has someone tried this method before." Shangguan Ce watched Yun Yilan's directed stare, suddenly felt his body turned cold and couldn't help but step back. He spied Li Xuan behind him, saw his face had turned ashen too. "Senior brother, don't tell me you," Shangguan Ce seemed for the first time, spoke with such difficulty, "don't tell me you plan to use this method." Yun Yilan frowned, forceful but without anger, he sneered and said, "If not this then what shall we do? We work so hard for several hundred years, looking as the big thing is about to be accomplished but with so many incidents, now even the most important formation is destroyed. Don't tell me you want me to watch as our hard work goes down the drain." Shangguan Ce seemed to have some hesitant, argued, "Senior brother, the big matter is of course important, this method is really too." Yun Yilan coldly cut him off, said, "Shangguan junior brother, being so tenacious, don't tell me you still vaguely regard yourself as the good faction. Then for so many years, for this important thing, what you have done are not regarded as good faction ways right." Shangguan Ce was speechless. Yun Yilan's gaze sharp, looked as if about to stab into a person's heart, stared at Shangguan Ce, said, "And, Shangguan junior brother, that day, the Inferno altar is our sect's sacred place, was guarded by you, unexpectedly it was in your hands that resulted in the situation today, do you know?" Shangguan Ce was shocked, looked up but saw Yun Yilan's cold stare, like knife, looking at him. Shangguan Ce's expression looked agitated, his body slightly trembling, appeared like he had words to say but for some reason, under Yun Yilan's stare, he eventually shrank. After a long time, a defeated look on his face, quietly said, "I understand." Yun Yilan nodded, said, "Since it is so, I will leave this thing to you, other than that, Zuner," he turned and looked at Li Xuan. Li Xuan's expression was also strange, suddenly heard his teacher calling him, he came to attention and quickly said, "Disciple is here." Yun Yilan glanced at him, said, "You will follow your Shangguan teacher uncle, learn well and also assist him." Li Xuan turned pale, his voice turned hoarse and quietly said, "Yes." Yun Yilan took a final look at the stone drawings, frowning, turned and did not look back, walked out, after the sound of the heavy door, leaving only Shangguan Ce and Li Xuan, both staring at each other in daze. For a long time, nobody spoke, the two of them also slowly walked out. Inferno altar again descended into silence. XXX. In the air, a faint sound was heard, 2 figures gently floated down. Xiao Wei Gigi called out twice, jumped onto the ground and went off to play again. In the first few days, it was still rather curious about the drawings but after a few days, looking still the same, the monkey lost interest in it. Ghost Li and Jin Pinger after landed, for a moment nobody spoke, the surrounding atmosphere was still cold, as if the strange energy from Yun Yilan had not dispersed. After a long time, Jin Pinger suddenly said, "The person that they were talking about, what person is that?" Ghost Li glanced at her, answered with another question, "What do you think?" Jin Pinger smiled and said, "I am 90% confident that they are talking about the beast deity." However, from their tones, I am not sure if they know where the beast deity is. Ghost Lee silently nodded, said, and one more thing, the formation in this altar. From their words it seemed like they also want to use the formation to deal with the beast deity. Don't tell me they knew for certain that the beast deity will come to this altar, or that this formation can be moved. Jin Pinger's elegant brows frowned. Clearly she too could not understand many important points about this, for the moment pondered. Ghost Lee's eyes slowly moved onto the stone drawings, after a long time, suddenly sneered, said, so this is the so-called good faction, with humans as blood offering to vicious deities, even in the evil sect, I have never seen this kind of thing. He had not finished his words, suddenly heard Jin Pinger's clear laughter beside, in the laughter a faint strange tone, like a sneer, like mocking, and an indistinct concealed fear, said, how do you know in our holy sect, there isn't such a thing? Ghost Lee's body shook, turned and looked at her, saw Jin Pinger smiling but she had already turned her head away. Ghost Lee frowned, coldly said, what do you mean? Suddenly, before he could finish his words, Ghost Lee's voice turned hoarse. At that moment, for some reason, he suddenly remembered that day when the great shaman was casting the spells to save Bai Yao, sought fresh blood from Ghost King to draw the formation's drawings. And Ghost King, almost in a blink, produced sufficient amount of blood. The bowls of blood, where did it come from? Ghost Lee stood in a daze, felt his body turned cold, unable to speak anymore. Chapter 193 Unusual. The sun setting, hung far in the horizon, behind those tall precipitous undulating range of mountains, spilling the remnant warmth onto the southern border vast lands. The evening rays descended onto the silent great earth, the sounds from the wild countryside, a blanket of somber. Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger had left Fenshong Valley, stood in the wilderness before the 10,000s great mountains, facing the vast great earth and lofty mountains which appeared to stretch on forever. They looked to be two insignificant tiny and small living things, looking up at the monumental presence of heaven and earth, at the sun setting in the horizon, slowly descending behind the boundless mountains, the sky gradually turning dark. In the time to converse and breathe, the stars and constellations rotated. Who else could win against time? To leave Fenshong Valley was Ghost Lee's idea. By chance they overheard Yun Yilan's conversation, knew that Fenshong Valley might still have ways to activate the formation. It was a really good opportunity. Basing on Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger's motives for coming, they by right should continue to observe secretly. But for some reason, Ghost Lee with a look of indifference, still suggested leaving Fenshong Valley, and Jin Pinger who had always been sharp-witted, seemed not to consider that point and also agreed with him right away. After leaving Fenshong Valley, Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger did not talk much, and also did not discuss the future plans, but both seemed to have some chemistry and headed south together, until this day where they arrived before that legendary terrible place, 10,000s great mountains, under the Black Mountains, in the wild countryside, both silently staring at the mountains. The breeze blew past the countryside, not a single flower or grass fragrance, only some unknown indistinct smell of blood and sounds of roars. In this place, even the wind, also seemed harsh. Jin Pinger's hair gently ruffled in the wind, she lifted her head slightly, revealing her smooth dainty jaw, and a stretch of fair and white neck, gazing at the distant mountains, where the dark mountain summits were, enveloped in dusky mist, swirling incessantly. Behind those mountain ranges, what kind of world was it? Others might be guessing, but in Jin Pinger's shrouded eyes, something seemed to be glimmering. Different from that coquettish girl who was silent beside him, even though Ghost Lee was taciturn, but along the way, Ghost Lee's thoughts were like the stormy sea, tossing high and low. Firstly was the blood sacrificial matter. The impact it had to him was immense, even though for so many years, he had killed many, and even earned the nickname, Shui Gongzi, in Ghost King sect. But as to what he had overheard in Fenshong Valley a few days ago, like a deeply rooted stubbornness in his heart, he subconsciously felt revulsion and disgust. And after Jin Pinger's inadvertent reminder, realized something he had always neglected. In the evil sect, even if it was Ghost King, could also do something similar to what Fenshong Valley was about to do. Taking numerous humans' blood, offering to the gods and deities, without guessing, this deity must belong to those ferocious, evil kinds, and blood sacrificial itself, was without doubt something that was greatly disruptive to heaven and inhuman, and yet these things happened to him. What kind of world was this exactly? Unless all the people in this world were also mad. Or was it like what that alluring strange young man, the one whom he met coincidentally, who once said, humans, in the end were only just a kind of animal, no difference. Ghost Lee inhaled deeply, silently gazed towards the distant mountains. Ever since he received Ghost King's instructions from Mr. Ghost, from that, Teoti, he already guessed that strange young man whom he had met twice, was the beast deity that created this catastrophe. Just that, the beast deity massacred the world. Why did he let him go? And both times they only chatted and parted ways. It was something Ghostly could not figure out. Near his chest, there was a faint warmth. For so many years, this faint warmth had always accompanied Ghostly, as if it was already part of him. Even most of the time, Ghostly had already forgotten about the warmth. However, several days ago from Fenshong Valley's actions, again stirred something deep inside his heart, the jade piece lying quietly near his chest. Maybe this was then the crux of this southern borders trip. From Yun Yilan and Shangguanxi's conversations, clearly stated that because Fenshong Valley had lost this thousand fires essence, therefore caused them to also lose the volcano spiritual energy accumulated for several hundred years, unable to trigger the formation again. And having this inferno mirror, did it mean they could find the secret of that mysterious formation? Ghostly was silent, gazing at the sunset in the distant. The last ray, finally too, disappeared. Where the dark mountain summits were, following the disappearance of the last ray, the once thick dark mist, as if being stimulated by something, started to swiftly disperse, turn thin. Standing beside, Jin Pinger smiled, turned her head over, said, "All right, let's go." Ghostly glanced sideways at her, said, "The change in the poisonous fog over there at 10,000's Great Mountains has never been told by anyone. How did you find out?" Jin Pinger smiled sweetly, her eyes extremely flirtatious, like seducing, like cunning, said, "This I will not tell you. What can you do to me?" Ghostly was stunned, saw under the gradually darkening sky, deep in the mountains, the girl beside him out of the sudden, like emanating alluring beautiful glow in the dark dim world, extremely dazzling, with her around, although unexpected, but it had another type of warmth. At least, in that distant darkness, he did not have to walk alone. Ghostly's lips twitched, but he turned his head, indifferently said, "Let's go." After speaking, he led the way. Jin Pinger watched his back figure, smiling faintly, her eyes glimmering, followed easily. One before another, and that monkey crouching on one's shoulder, frequently making "jeet" sounds, slowly merging into the darkness, disappeared. XXX. Qing Yun Hill, Tong Tien Peak, Crystal Hall. Leaving southern border thousands and thousands miles away, this immortal sacred ground which had just saved the world, the demon beast catastrophe which brought chaos like the good and evil big battle 10 years ago, swiftly and appropriately handled, Tong Tien Peak for the most part had already resumed its beautiful surreal scenery, other than a few huge buildings which would need time to repair, but nobody would doubt, they would soon be restored back to its original look. Of all of the big buildings at Tong Tien Peak, the most important and also the biggest, naturally, was the main hall, Crystal Jade Hall. Compared to other buildings, the damage that Crystal Jade Hall received in that catastrophe could almost be disregarded. Seemed like Qing Yun sect's ancestors were really effective, their protection working. And right now, just when Ghostly and Jin Pinger were about to enter that mysterious mountains, to pursue that beast deity who escaped after being defeated, Qing Yun Hill Tong Tien Peak, in that sacred Crystal Jade Hall, yet another argument broke out. Qing Yun sect, other than the oldest branch Tong Tien Peak, the other 6 branches after the catastrophe, rarely gathered again in Crystal Jade Hall, but the most important thing was, their gathering this time was not called by sect head Reverend Dao Zan, instead they came on their own. In the Great Hall, greeting the various branch leaders, was not Reverend Dao Zan but Xiao Yikai, who was looking slightly awkward. Within the 6 leaders, Longshou Valley leader Qihao and Morning Sun Valley leader Chu Yuhong, both of them were the 2nd generation disciples, same generation as Xiao Yikai. Naturally, it would not be appropriate for them to talk directly like the other 4 teacher uncles. Most of the time, both of them stayed quiet. But for the other leaders, Big Bamboo Valley, Small Bamboo Valley, Return of the Wind Valley, Sunset Valley, their words were not so polite. Big Bamboo Valley Tian Buyi's voice among the 4 leaders was the loudest. He was seen sitting on the red sandalwood chair, coldly speaking to Xiao Yikai. "Xiao teacher nephew, today the 6 of us gathering here, has already been 4 hours, why isn't sect head senior brother out to see us yet? Don't tell me to him, the few of us are already this undesirable." Xiao Yikai's face looked awkward, smiled with difficulty, said, "What are you saying, Tian teacher uncle? You elders have always been held in high prestige and respect in Qing Yun sect, teacher has also valued you highly, this everyone also knows it." Tian Buyi, without waiting for him to finish his words, snorted, sneered and said, "So sect head senior brother actually valued me that highly, left me here high and dry for 4 hours and still do nothing about it." Xiao Yikai was taken aback for a moment, laughed bitterly and said, "Tian teacher uncle, disciple has already said, teacher indeed 10 days ago entered illusory moon cave in seclusion, locking himself in and did not come out. The current Tong Tien Peak matters temporarily are left to disciple. The other elders also sneered at the same time, clearly they did not believe Xiao Yikai's words. Small Bamboo Valley Shui Yu Master coldly said, Xiao teacher nephew, in the past 10 days, although I am in Small Bamboo Valley but I have on many occasions heard about sect head senior brother's eccentric behaviors at Tong Tien Peak. Even worse, several days ago on a certain late night, someone said sect head senior brother seemed to be mad, howling at the sky on Crystal Jade Hall's rooftop. Is there such matter? Xiao Yikai immediately shook his head, said, there is no such matter, no such matter. Shui Yu teacher uncle must have misheard. Teacher is a master of enlightenment, the world's good faction leader, with the demeanor of a transcendent being. How would he do such presumptuous thing? The four elders looked at each other, saw the suspicions in each other's eyes on Xiao Yikai's words. Sitting beside Return of the Wind Valley leader seat. Taoist Tian Ri, taking over Taoist Tian Yun in Sunset Valley. Looked ordinary and thin, wearing a Taoist robe, his brows frowning said, Xiao teacher nephew, it's not that we are trying to make things difficult for you but it is really that sect head senior brother is the core of our Qing Yun sect. If something happens to him, it will most likely shake the foundation of our Qing Yun, and it is also because of that, we decided that we must come forward and question you must not take it to heart. The other branch leaders sat down. The center seat which belonged to Reverend Dao Zan was naturally empty. Xiao Yikai was lower in rank than his teacher uncles and so had to stand beside. Right now he could only laugh bitterly and said, various teacher uncles, disciple, no matter what, will not dare to bear grudges, but teacher he really did go into seclusion and ordered specifically that he should not be disturbed. It is not Yikai deliberately preventing various teacher uncles from meeting teacher. Tian Buyi angrily snorted, said, you don't have to speak nonsense anymore. These few days, the rumors spread to the entire Qing Yun sect. Sect heads' behaviors are extremely weird, staying at Tong Tien Peak the whole day and at times going crazy, at times looking lost. If sect head senior brother is unwell, we as junior brothers no matter what, will also think of ways to treat him, at least visit him. If he is fine, then why would he refuse to see us? He suddenly raised his voice, angrily said, Xiao Yikai, tell me honestly, what exactly happened to sect head senior brother? Xiao Yikai was stunned, as if he was startled by Tian Buyi's voice but he was still smiling bitterly, keeping quiet. Return of the Wind Valley Zhang Shuchong who did not speak much, glanced at Xiao Yikai, frowning tightly, said, why not like this, Xiao teacher nephew, we know that you have always been respectful of your teacher, do not dare to defy him, we will also not make things difficult for you. Now we only need you to lead us to where sect head senior brother is, we will pay our respect to him on our own, what do you think? Xiao Yikai was stunned for a moment, couldn't speak, a pondering look appeared on his face. Zhang Shuchong turned his head over, glanced to the rest, Tian Buyi, Shui Yu Master and the rest slowly nodded. Zhang Shuchong coughed once and slowly stood up, his voice calm, said, Xiao teacher nephew, actually we are only concerned about sect head senior brother. To senior brother, we have always been utmost respectful, this everyone in Qing Yun sect is aware. Once we see sect head senior brother and know that he is well, we will naturally be relieved, isn't it? Oh right, heard that sect head senior brother in seclusion recently. According to Qing Yun sect rules, it is only limited to Crystal Jade Hall, Founder's Ancestral Hall and Illusory Moon Cave. I do not know if he... Zhang Shuchong at the end of his words, his voice turned slow, his eyes glanced at Xiao Yikai instead. Xiao Yikai turned red, after a long time, bowing his head slightly to them, said, teacher in the recent year, because Qing Yun suffered many unforeseen events, frequently blames himself, and also frequently visits the Founder's Ancestral Hall to offer incenses to the ancestors. Zhang Shuchong frowned, nodded, did not speak more, headed first to the back of Crystal Jade Hall. Tian Buyi, Shui Yu Master and Taoist Tian Ri also followed. Qi Hao and Chu Yuhong slowly stood up, walked to Xiao Yikai. Qi Hao's face also had a bitter smile, stretched his hand out and gently patted Xiao Yikai on his shoulder. Xiao Yikai sighed and shook his head. XXX. The Founder's Ancestral Hall was still concealed in the deep forest, only between the gaps of the lush green leaves, revealed a little of the roof eaves. Maybe it was really the protection of the ancestors. The two earth-shocking catastrophes in Qing Yun sect for the past 10 years did no damage to this place. Like in the past, looking at it from a distance, the dim ancestral hall indistinctly had incense smoke swirling and lights flickering, giving one an unfathomable feeling. The group soon reached the three-forked road before Founder's Ancestral Hall. Suddenly, Chihao, who was walking slightly behind Maid, exclaimed, quickly walked up. The group looked at him, saw before the partially concealed founder's ancestral hall. A young man was standing there quietly, unmoving, but his eyes were staring into the founder's ancestral hall, back-facing Chihao and the rest. Chihao frowned, called out, "Is it Lin Jr. brother?" That young man appeared startled, turned around. It was indeed Lin Jingyu. Lin Jingyu saw Chihao, the light flashed past his face, but following which he saw the group behind Chihao, and among them the various branch leaders, couldn't help but was taken aback. His face revealed shock. "Chi senior brother, why are you here? And the various teacher uncles senior brothers, why are they all here?" Chihao walked to Lin Jingyu, smiled and said, "A while ago on the way here, I was just thinking if I will be able to see you here. We two brothers really have not met for many days." Lin Jingyu clearly was happy to see Chihao too, smiled and said, "Yes, I missed senior brother much too." "Oh right." He looked at the rest, quietly asked Chihao, "Senior brother, you came with the various branch leaders, what is it for?" Chihao glanced at the founder's ancestral hall behind Lin Jingyu, frowned, said, "Lin Jr. brother, that sect head teacher uncle, is he inside the founder's ancestral hall?" For some reason, when he spoke, he did not deliberately lowered his voice, instead he seemed to want the rest to hear it too. Lin Jingyu's smile slowly disappeared. Obviously he also noticed something was amiss, but facing the branch leaders and senior brothers, he had to reply honestly, "Sect head reverend is in the hall." A stir was heard behind Chihao, quickly it died down, then, Zhang Shuchong's calm and slightly tired voice said, "What is sect head senior brother doing inside? Is he in seclusion?" Lin Jingyu looked nonplussed, said, "Seclusion, what seclusion?" Chihao's countenance changed, Tian Buyi's face changed too and stepped forward, but he was held back by Zhang Shuchong. Zhang Shuchong signaled to Tian Buyi, shook his head and then glanced at Chihao. Chihao understood, frowned and asked Lin Jingyu, "Lin Jr. brother, have you been at Tongtian Peak recently?" Lin Jingyu nodded, said, "That's right." Chihao was silent for a moment, considered his words and then slowly said, "At Tongtian Peak, did you saw or heard any strange things?" Lin Jingyu thought for a moment, his eyes swept past the group, gradually brightened, but his expression did not change, honestly replying, "Senior brother, although I have been at Tongtian Peak but these few days, I am almost always at the founder's ancestral hall keeping vigil and in mourning for senior, therefore whatever happens outside, I am not aware." He paused, looking at Chihao, said, "Senior brother, don't tell me something happened." Chihao paused, smiled bitterly and shook his head, said, "No, nothing happened." "Oh right, why are you standing here in broad daylight? Aren't you keeping vigil in the hall?" Lin Jingyu looked towards the dim interior, said, "It was sect head reverend who told me to stand out here. Every time he is here, he will ask me to stand out here and then he will enter the hall by himself." Zhang Shuchong and the rest countenances changed slightly. Chihao also frowned, said, "Then sect head teacher uncle, is he still inside now?" Lin Jingyu nodded, said, "Yes, he is inside the hall." Chihao nodded, stepped back and did not speak. Zhang Shuchong and the rest looked at each other but nobody moved. After a moment, Tian Buyi snorted, strutted out. When he reached the entrance, he did not walk up the stairs, loudly called out, "Daozan senior brother, I am Tian Buyi, with Shui Yu, Tian Ri and Zhang Shuchong as well as other two branches leaders teacher nephews, we came to see you. Are you there?" His voice was loud, with strong stamina, immediately reverberated in the forest, in the dim dark hall. Even the spots of candles seemed to brighten up abruptly and then gradually resumed as normal. After a moment, a voice suddenly was heard in the darkness, coldly speaking, "What is it?" Tian Buyi and the other leaders were shocked. The yin coldness was heavy in the voice, indistinctly carried a few degrees of viciousness, not the slightest like Reverend Daoxuan's original clear and righteousness tone, but all of them were people who knew Reverend Daozan for more than several hundred years. They could tell immediately that this was Reverend Daoxuan's voice. This Taoist immortal who once led the world's good faction, could it be that something untoward had happened to him? With such thoughts, Tian Buyi and the rest expressions changed. Tian Buyi coughed, inhaled deeply, again clearly said, "Senior brother, we heard that you are not feeling well recently and so specially came to visit, will like to ask senior brother to allow us to enter." Reverend Daoxuan's voice was silent. When it rang out again, a sneer accompanied it. The chillness penetrated the bone. "Visit me? Do you need 6 branch leaders to come together to see me? I see that all of you intentionally came to force the king to abdicate, eyeing my position as sect head reverend." Once the words were out, like a lightning out of thin air, shocking everyone. Even Tian Buyi couldn't help but step back, a face in shock. He turned and looked, saw even Shui Yu, who had always been detached, had an unbelievable expression. Zhang Shukang's eyes were full of worry. He stepped forward, loudly said, "Sect head senior brother, what are you saying? We as your junior brothers and sisters, for several hundred years, never have this thought, never before, now too and more even so in the future. These few days we have been coming, is because we are concerned about senior brother's health, definitely without ulterior motive, senior brother must never misunderstand." Reverend Daoshuan's voice suddenly raised, sneered and said, "Zhang Shuchong, within the 6 leaders, you have always been the most scheming. That day you were already suspicious of Longsho Valley Kangsong and yet you kept quiet. Don't tell me you thought that I didn't know." Zhang Shuchang's countenance changed greatly. Tian Buyi and the rest also turned in shock and looked at Zhang Shuchong. Shui Yu master stared at Zhang Shuchong, after a long time, said, "Is this true?" Zhang Shuchong made a bitter laugh, shook his head and said, This, where do I start?" Shui Yu master wanted to ask further. Suddenly the numerous dim candles lighted up, unable to see clearly in the darkness, but for some reason, made one felt that in the darkness, some strange thing howled. Almost at the same time, Reverend Daoshuan's voice was heard again, but the target this time had shifted from Zhang Shuchong to Shui Yu master. "Shui Yu, what are you pretending? You think with your aloof and detached look, you are really righteous and stern." His voice was weird, vaguely shrill and hoarse. That time when Wan Jianyi was down and kept in Founder's ancestral hall to sweep the grounds till old age, and in the end died by the evil sect hands, it all started because of you, all thanks to you all. Ha 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 ha. Until the end, his voice seemed uncontrollable and became hysterical. Then, at that moment, nobody paid close attention to him anymore. Every one of them were pale, stared in shock at Shui Yu. For a long time nobody spoke. The few short words were really too shocking. Chi Hao and the junior brothers were nonplussed, and Shui Yu master was trembling. For some reason, her eyes had a burning glare never seen before, stepped forward, seemed to disregard everything else, loudly shouted into the hall, You, what did you say? Don't tell me Wan senior brother he is still alive." The words brought all to attention. Everyone agitated, started to ask questions towards the hall. And Reverend Daoshuan's hysterical laughter seemed to turn wilder, reverberated in the air, for a long time. Chapter 194 Secrets Leaked. Southern Border, the 10,000's Great Mountains. Traversing the Black Mountains, entering the 10,000's Great Mountains, Ghostly felt that he had entered a world that was truly primitive wilderness. In fact, in the evil sect, the wilderness was a reference to the extreme northwest of the divine land, vast territories, a vast desolate stretch of area. Most were Gobi Desert, barren, and even if there was life, it was only for the most stubborn species, and therefore named as such. And the legendary holy temple in the evil sect was located in that desert, but just that Ghostly had never been there. But the world before him now, clearly was completely different from that said wilderness. In the 10,000's Great Mountains, not only it was not barren, every inch was brimming with life. Large swaths of primitive forests, there was no space to lands so full of vegetation that the plants seemed to be fighting for space. And behind the endless trees and brambles, there seemed to be endless number of poisonous evil animals. In the dim shadows around, felt like there would always be the hungry eyes of the predators watching you, waiting for the opportunity to make a snack out of the unwary. To people like Ghostly and Jin Pinger, these common poisons were naturally not much of a threat, but with this volume, it was a headache. Although they could fly, but firstly the air above these forests sporadically had a strange miasma fog rising through the top of the trees. Secondly, although they were highly skilled, they still need rest, but the harassments from outside never showed signs of stopping. A few days later, even the monkey Xiao Wei was beginning to get restless. Here, besides the poisonous fog and evil beasts lurking, the strange weather in the 10,000's Great Mountains was rather hard for humans to bear. What was different from Central Plains was, there was no clouds, weather's transitions etc. Storms appeared and vanished without warning. Initially it was still clear skies, the next instant heavy storms poured, stopping out of a sudden. The moment before lightning and thunders rumbled, the next moment cloudless for miles. The suddenness was startling. There was no pattern conceivable to the length of the rainfall as well. At times it rained for just a short while, and other times it rained for days. It was really unfathomable. At the moment, the two of them were walking through the darkness of the forest, shrouded under the canopy of falling rain. The reason the two of them did not cast spells and fly, was because when they were about to do so, they discovered that even when it was raining, the tops of the forests were still emanating the strange dark miasma fog. On the contrary, the air on the ground was much more normal. Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger were both figures who had practiced long in evil sect, their discernment ability definitely not lacking and naturally knew the severity of it. After discussion, they would rather be more cautious and walk through the forest instead. This stretch of forest was similar to the other undisturbed forests in the 10,000s great mountains where the foliage were dense and closely entwined. There was no direct paths for the rain to the ground, instead droplets slitted and dripped down these leaves and branches, their cold breathing echoed through the forest, except for their footsteps making the rustling sounds and the distant rain dripping, the whole forest lay asleep. Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger had no umbrellas, most likely they did not pack them, but even if they did, in this kind of dense forest, they would be hampered by the tugging of the branches against the umbrellas. Xiao Wei was silent, he curled his body and lay on Ghost Lee's shoulder. The rain's constant dripping had drenched his fur, sticking it close to his body. Ghost Lee's face was also drenched with the rain, but he looked indifferent as he walked in front, as if he did not feel the strange surrounding atmosphere. Jin Pinger followed him, no indication of fatigue too, but her slightly tousled hair and somehow cold expression seemed to betray her unhappy mood. This stretch of forest was in fact the same black forest that she came the last time. Jin Pinger clearly knew, after this forest and around a few hills, they would arrive at their destination, and in fact too, she relayed this to Ghost Lee. Sha! Ghost Lee had reached out to break a hanging branch that was part of an extremely tough vine branch, and yet in his hand it was as fragile as tofu. Jin Pinger looked at the branch in his hand silently, frowning as she stared deep in thought. Suddenly, Ghost Lee made a "I" sound, paused and then hurried a few steps left to a gorgeous view off a cliff, surrounded by rocks of several kai wide and no vegetation. Below their feet were a sea of clouds, rolling with 5 colors. It was an unbelievable sight. Footsteps were heard, and Jin Pinger appeared at his side. Her expression changed slightly. This was where she was trapped by the mysterious man dressed in black. After her lucky escape, she inadvertently found the kill the living monk's knife below the cliff rocks. Just that, she looked at Ghost Lee and stayed silent, clearly not intending to mention the past events to him. Ghost Lee stared far, overlooking the sea of clouds. After a while, he shook his head slightly and said, "The colorful clouds below, I'm afraid it's just more miasma." Jin Pinger nodded and said, "I think so too." Ghost Lee looked at her and asked, "How much further?" Jin Pinger raised her hand and gently wiped the water droplets off her forehead, pondered and said, "Should be close. I remember the last time when I was here, I walked no further than around 2 hours and I was out of the Black Forest. Out here and then crossing 2 more mountains, we will reach Subdue Devil Ancient Cave." As she was saying that, she paused and with some puzzlement said, "Strange, the last time I was here, there were many evil beasts, but along the way, besides the poisonous insects, we have not met even one of those beasts." Ghost Lee said indifferently, "Most probably those beasts that you saw had followed the beast deity out of the mountains to hunt." Jin Pinger looked shocked and realized that it was a definite possibility, and her expression turned to disgust. No matter what, even though she was from the evil sect, she could not stand these inhuman attacks. Or maybe, in that Central Plains venomous Viper Valley battle, Heihuan sect was annihilated, even though Ghost Lee still did not know how Jin Pinger managed to escape alone and took refuge under Ghost King, but guessed that Jin Pinger would not have any good feelings towards these demon beasts. Ghost Lee took a deep breath and said, "Let's go," and then turned and walked back to the dark forest. Jin Pinger was about to follow when she suddenly turned around and looked down at the cliff, frowning slightly as she was absorbed in thought. Ahead, Ghost Lee walked for a while before realizing Jin Pinger was not keeping up, turned back and called for her, startling Jin Pinger. She laughed coquettishly and said, "Why, missing me already?" Ghost Lee glanced at her, a look of detached, and walked on. Jin Pinger smiled and followed along. Just as she was about to enter the forest, her hand suddenly waved and a flash of light shot out of her hand, making a doot muffled sound and embedded itself into a remote gap in a secluded corner of the cliff. Light flashed in that gap. It was the kill the living knife. And in a blink of an eye, Jin Pinger's silhouette disappeared. The desolate storm seemed to shroud over again, concealing this part of the Black Forest. At far, the vast firmament of the 10,000s mountains seemed to be gray, not knowing if there was some kind of god or demon howling in the netherworld, watching the mortals in the world which seemed so insignificant. The storm intensifies. XXX. As Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger battled the howling wind and rain in pursuit for the traces of the beast deity, the atmosphere in southern border outside the 10,000 mountains was also heating up. More and more good faction disciples arrived at the southern border, and in the hustle and bustle, their arrival almost quickly reduced the number of demons here in the southern border. and on southern border this land, there had never been such many gathering of Central Plains people, and most of them were cultivated martial artists. The local 5 tribes of the southern border indigenous people regarded these outsiders with a distant and respectful attitude, and amongst the righteous disciples, there seemed to be a strange atmosphere. For most of them, as long as they were not of the same sect or clan, they maintained their distance. There were even rumors that certain sects had conflicts. As for the reasons, no one had ever loudly declared it out. In a certain sense, cultivated sect Fenshong Valley is the southern border longest resident sect, naturally became the best place to visit for disciples who were not familiar with the local geography, so this valley had changed from its usual tranquility to a busy stream of people coming and going every day. And it was also in these circumstances, this day, 3 visitors arrived at the valley, a man and 2 women from the Qingyun sect, Return of the Wind Valley Zhang Shushu and Small Bamboo Valley Wenmin and Lu Shuiqi. Of course, there were more than these 3 disciples from Qingyun sect who came to the southern border. In fact, Qingyun sect, known as the world's first good faction sect, sent countless disciples of the younger generation here, but the best skilled disciples, however, could not make their way here, except for the few that already held important roles such as Qihao, Xiaoyi Kai. Due to Reverend Daoxuan's absence recently, the daily affairs at Tongtian Peak of all sorts were left to him to handle and so could not leave. As for Lin Jingyu, this time he insisted to remain at Founder's Ancestral Hall. It was said he was keeping vigil for a certain Qingyun senior whom he had great gratitude for, and so could not come. And amongst the remaining ones, Zhang Shushu and Lu Shuiqi were left to lead. For Zhang Shushu it was quite straightforward. His father Zhang Shuchong only gave a few instructions to him before leaving, but for Lu Shuiqi, it was more complicated. It was said that Shui Yu Master was initially unwilling to give permission, but later on for some reason she changed her mind and purposely sent Lu Shuiqi's senior sister Wenmin along. But there was a good point that when Min came along, Zhang Shushu had another companion to talk to. Otherwise, like Zhang Shushu's enthusiastic character, to travel with Lu Shuiqi's ice-like personality, out of one day, Zhang Shushu's 9 out of 10 conversations would be to himself, and the last sentence most likely would be Lu Shuiqi impatiently ordering him to go away. On the journey to the southern border, Zhang Shushu, on the contrary, got along well with Wenmin. The 3 of them discussed together. Zhang Shushu was adamant that as fellow good faction sects, arriving in southern border, they still have to make a visit to Fenshong Valley to pay their respects. Only Lu Shuiqi seemed reluctant, indifferently expressed her opinion, said that it was not their first time to the southern border and roughly knew where to go. There was no need to trouble others. Zhang Shushu and Wenmin both knew that Lu Shuiqi still had a knot in her heart. That day at Qingyun Tongtian Peak Crystal Jade Hall, she publicly rejected Fenshong Valley leader Yun Yilan's favorite disciple Li Xuan's marriage proposal, humiliating Yun Yilan and Reverend Dao Zan. Naturally, she was unwilling to have any contact with the Fenshong Valley people. However, after repeated discussions between Zhang Shushu and Wenmin, they felt that it was still best for Wenmin to persuade Lu Shuiqi. They still have to make an appearance, if not next time it would not look nice in front of the elders. Lu Shuiqi hesitated a few times, and finally agreed. The 3 of them arrived at the entrance of Fenshong Valley. The 3 of them already had some fame, especially Lu Shuiqi, whose beauty was fabled to be capable of causing the fall of a city or nation. Since the rise of the younger generation in Qingyun sect, her fame and beauty had risen even more. To the Fenshong Valley, Lu Shuiqi meant even something more. The moment when the 3 of them reached the entrance, they were almost immediately recognized by Fenshong disciples. After the initial astonishment, there seemed to be some rousing and someone quickly ran in to report while others stepped forward to greet them. The first person in front smiled and cupped his hands in greeting. "Ah, senior sister Lu, arrival in Fenshong Valley is such an honor. These 2 must be Qingyun sect's senior brother and sister, please come in." From the back, Zhang Shushu glanced at Wenmin and stuck his tongue out at her secretly, thinking to himself that this Lu Shuiqi was really famous. Even the ordinary disciples could recognize her with a glance, and he and Wenmin were negated to just the companions of the beauty. They were not upset about that. Zhang Shushu had even wider smile on his face, along the way laughed and joked with the disciples. Hearty laughters were heard frequently. Wenmin, walking along at the back of the group, smiled and softly said to Lu Shuiqi, who was beside her, "Junior sister, look at that Zhang junior brother. They have only just met and he is already mixing so well with them. It is really impressive." Lu Shuiqi looked at Zhang Shushu, who already had his arm around a Fenshong Valley disciple's shoulder, smiled faintly and said nothing. Soon, with the lead of the Fenshong Valley disciples, they arrived at Fenshong Valley Mountain River Hall. In the hall, Yun Yilin was sitting at the head seat and waiting for them with a smile. Obviously, to the head of Fenshong Valley Master, these three high-ranking disciples from Qingyun sect were very much different from other sects. Even so, however, Zhang Shushu, Wen Min and Lu Shuiqi were not those who didn't know their limits. Knowing Yun Yilin's status, being personally received was really rather beneath him. After the three of them rushed forward to pay their respects, Zhang Shushu said, "How could Master Yun come out personally to receive us? It should be us junior to pay our respects instead, as juniors are really overwhelmed with this honor." Yun Yilin smiled gently, with a kind face, laughed and replied, "What is this talk, good nephew? I have been friends with your teacher uncle Reverend Dao Zan and your father Zhang Shuchong senior brother, for more than several hundred years. There is no need to stand on ceremony." "How are they?" Zhang Shushu respectfully replied, "Sect head teacher uncle and father are both well. Both of them instructed me that I must come and pay my respects to Yun teacher uncle when I have arrived at the southern border." Yun Yilin laughed and nodded. "After I left Qingyun, several days have passed by so quickly. I really do miss those few dear friends." As he said that, he smiled and glanced at Wen Min before looking at the expressionless Lu Shuiqi. Feeling his eyes on her, Lu Shuiqi looked up and saw Yun Yilin smiling at her. There was also someone else beside him, with a complex expression and a bitter smile, also looking at her. It was Li Xuan. Lu Shuiqi said nothing, bowed her head slightly. Yun Yilin smiled, looked away and said, "Why are you all still standing? Our sects are not of ordinary relations, we are family, quickly sit." Zhang Shushu and the rest asked for forgiveness and sat down. Yun Yilin chatted with the three, and got to know that Wen Min and Lu Shuiqi are both from Small Bamboo Valley, under Shuiyu Master's tutelage, and so asked several more questions about Shuiyu Master. Wen Min answered all questions dutifully, and after, Yun Yilin spoke with Zhang Shushu. From the beginning to the end, Yun Lilan seemed to know Lu Shuiqi did not wish to speak and did not ask her any questions. Lu Shuiqi was also happily relaxed, sat beside quietly. However, the other disciples in the hall, including Li Xuan who was standing next to Yun Yilin, most the time, whether intentionally or unintentionally, glanced and lingered on Lu Shuiqi, her white as snow outfit and cold temperament. It was as if there was some strange magical effect, drawing all the light in the hall to her. Over the other side, Yun Yilin asked Zhang Shushu with a smile, "That day after the war, Reverend Dao Zan's senior brother defeated the beast deity for the common people, turning the tide, doing a great service to mankind. But when I left Qingyun, his injury was not healed yet. I wonder how is Reverend Dao Zan's senior brother's health now? He is now the leader of the good faction, commanding public respect and support." Zhang Shushu smiled and replied, "Yun teacher uncle's concern is appreciated, sect head teacher uncle as well. As long as the people could escape the catastrophe, a little suffering on Qingyun sect is nothing." Yun Yilin's smile became more kindly, picked up his tea to take a sip, then his eyes glimmered slightly, as if he coincidentally remembered something suddenly, laughed and said, "Oh yes, I have heard of a rumor recently, and since good nephew is here, just nice I can ask you about it." Zhang Shushu smiled, "Yun teacher uncle please speak, disciple will tell you everything I know." Yun Yilin nodded with eyes glinting deep inside his eyes, and said slowly, "I heard recently by accident, that during the big battle at Qingyun, after Reverend Dao Zan's senior brother defeated the evildoer beast deity, there was another fight at Qingyun and in the end, it was said that Qingyun's supreme treasure, Zhu Xian ancient sword, was actually broken and damaged. Is there such thing?" At that remark, an instant silence fell. In that moment not a single sound, and Zhang Shushu, Wen Min and Lu Shuiqi stood up at the same time, their countenances changed, staring at Yun Yilin. And the other Fenshong Valley disciples, including Li Xuan, looked at Yun Yilin stunned. Only Yun Yilin himself behaved nonchalantly, as if he did not ask something that would shake the world, instead like asking something insignificant, gently lifted his tea and took another sip. Then, he smiled kindly and gently asked the three disciples of the Qingyun sect, is it really true?" In the Mountain River Hall, a dead silence. Chapter 195 Internal Injury. A long while later, after Zhang Shushu and the others recovered from the astonishment, the three looked at each other and saw the shock reflected in their eyes. However, what was different was, for Lu Shuiqi and Wen Min, their eyes held additional alarm and confusion. This which only a small number of Big Bamboo Valley and Small Bamboo Valley disciples were aware. Furthermore, Reverend Dao Zan had privately sternly commanded several times that this secret must not be divulged. In the end, was it still leaked? Different from Wen Min and Lu Shuiqi, the damage to Zhu Xian ancient sword news was even more startling to Zhang Shushu, who was kept in the dark about this, but after recovering, Zhang Shushu chuckled and said, "Yun teacher uncle, how could you play such a joke on us juniors? I was almost scared to death just now. The Zhu Xian ancient sword is Qing Yun sect's supreme precious treasure, held in safekeeping by sect head teacher uncle himself, how could it be damaged?" He, ha, ha, ha. Laughing, Zhang Shushu kept shaking his head and then turned around to see his other two companions, wanting to see their amusements at this ridiculous rumor. Except, his smile stiffened, there was no trace of a smile on either Lu Shuiqi or Wen Min, on the contrary, their brows were creased and their faces had paled. In the hall, Zhang Shushu's solitary laughter echoed and then died quickly. Yun Yilan smiled and said, "Oh, so it is just a rumor. That is for the best, else if the Zhu Xian ancient sword had been damaged, it would certainly be a disaster." Lu Shuiqi took an abrupt step forward, coldly asked Yun Yilan, "Yun teacher uncle, this is of course not a true rumor, and should not be believed. However, may I ask where did senior hear about this lowly and sneaky rumor?" Lu Shuiqi's voice got increasingly colder as she spoke, and was beginning to sound faintly rude. But Yun Yilan seemed to be well cultivated and did not seem to mind Lu Shuiqi's attitude, merely responded with his usual amiable manner with a wave of his hand. "Actually, this rumor is recently circulating in the southern border here. I inadvertently overheard some of the disciples talking about it, and did not expect it to hold any truth. Think about it, with Reverend Dao Zhan's senior brother's remarkable powers, how could such nonsense have happened? But just that since good nephew came to visit, I thought I would just ask in passing to seek reassurance that these rumors are indeed just rumors." "I am truly pleased," he said smiling, looking absolutely pleased. Lu Shuiqi and the rest frowned slightly. Such a matter, how would it be, casually, asked in public, not to mention the high status of Yun Yilan, how would he asked about such roadside gossip directly? The only logical conclusion was that he had some other plans. In Yun Yilan's laughter, the three Qing Yun disciples turned silent. Lu Shuiqi's face was as white as snow, and so cold she looked inhuman, her eyes turning sharper. Wenmin's complexion was just as pale. Zhang Shushu was indeed smooth, noticing the rapidly awkward atmosphere, promptly coughed and stepped forward, blocking Lu Shuiqi. Cupping his hands, he asked, "Yun teacher uncle, various senior teachers sent me here to southern border. The purpose is to pursue the demon beast. Wonder if you all have any clues that you can tell us. It will save us from running around blindly." Yun Yilan glanced Zhang Shushu and nodded slightly but did not speak. He looked to his back. Li Xuan understood and took a step forward, facing Zhang Shushu with his hands cupped. "Zhang senior brother, I am Li Xuan, acting under teacher's orders. I will serve as your guide here in the southern border, for you ladies and gentlemen." Humph! A snort of derision came from a corner, not even waiting for Li Xuan to finish. Li Xuan paused, his face immediately contorted with rage. Fortunately, Wen Min was quick-witted and laughed. "Li senior brother, there is no need to trouble you with this. There are some of us who have been to southern border before and are still familiar with the roads." Li Xuan took a deep breath, glanced at the white figure with the corner of his eyes, his mouth twitched, suddenly his anger seemed to disappear. With a small sigh and a forced smile, he said, "This senior sister, it is not what my intentions are. However, in the last few days we have managed to track down information about the missing beast deity." At these words, Lu Shuiqi, Zhang Shushu, and Wen Min became excited. Zhang Shushu asked delightedly, "Is this true?" Li Xuan nodded, "Indeed. In any case, Fenshang Valley has foundation and network of connections in the southern border for hundreds of years. We will still be better informed than outsiders." As he finished speaking, he glanced at Lu Shuiqi, intentionally or otherwise. Lu Shuiqi looked indifferent, and turned away. Zhang Shushu asked, "So where is the beast deity now?" Li Xuan said, "According to our news, that evildoer has fled into the strange depths of the 10,000 great mountains, towards the direction of his lair." Zhang Shushu and the others stared blankly. 10,000 great mountains. Li Xuan nodded, "Yes, needless for me to say, all of you would have heard about it. It is a strange and treacherous, mysterious and unfathomable, one of the world's most dangerous place. If you all have not arrived, I was also planning to lead a group of juniors to search the 10,000 great mountains. As such, since the three of you are here, if we all go together, wouldn't it be better? I don't have any other intentions, just that I have lived in the southern border for many years, and to some extent, have some knowledge of the dangers of the 10,000 great mountains. With me to guide, it would perhaps be beneficial and no disadvantage for the three of you." As he finished, he sneered. Zhang Shushu frowned, glanced backward at Wenmin and Lu Shuiqi and said, Li senior brother please wait, give us a moment to discuss. Li Xuan nodded his head and said, as you wish. Zhang Shushu and the others retreated to a corner and whispered in conversation. From Li Xuan's perspective, Zhang Shushu spoke for the majority of the time, with Wenmin inserting a few words now and then. Lu Shuiqi was silent, with occasional nods or shakes of her head. That lady in white seemed to be always that quiet, elegant and unsecular, quietly standing there. Li Xuan gazed at Lu Shuiqi from a distance, momentarily he looked infatuated. And at this moment, someone swatted his shoulder suddenly. Li Xuan gave a start, not expecting anyone to be able to come so close to him without his awareness, and quickly turned around. It was Yun Yilan. Li Xuan turned red, and whispered, Master, your disciple forgot himself, what is it? Yun Yilan glanced at Lu Shuiqi, with an expressionless face and said lightly, do not forget your task. Startled, Li Xuan quietly said, disciple understands. Yun Yilan nodded his head and said, take care of them, I'll head off first. As he left, he did not bid farewell to the three from Qingyun sect and left quietly. Li Xuan watched Yun Yilan figure disappeared into the entrance to the rear halls of the Mountain River Hall, his emotions in a mix, his face reflecting the uncertainty. At this time, Zhang Shushu and the others seemed to have finished their discussion and returned. Zhang Shushu walked over with a smile, and said, Li senior brother, we have discussed, this time, where's Yun teacher uncle? Li Xuan wore an apologetic face, and said, Master had a last-minute matter to deal with and seeing that the three of you were still in the middle of discussion, so he instructed me not to disturb and left first. We seek your forgiveness for the lack of manners. Zhang Shushu quickly replied, you are too kind, we are the ones that are lacking in manners, if we have breached any etiquette just now, could Li senior brother Li please convey to Yun teacher uncle that we are still juniors and unaware of the etiquette, didn't know our limits too, hope that he will not mind. Hearing Zhang Shushu's smooth words flowing out of his mouth like water, Lu Shuiqi and Wenmin looked somewhat embarrassed, but Zhang Shushu was at ease and did not appear embarrassed at all. Li Xuan smiled and nodded his head and did not say anything further about that, only asked, what about the conclusion of your discussion? Zhang Shushu cupped his hands and said, it looks like we will need to trouble Li senior brother. Li Xuan looked delighted, and replied the gesture, you're too kind, we are all one good faction family, we should do this. Speaking, he took a quick glance at Lu Shuiqi, coughed and said, however, 10,000 Great Mountains is after all an extremely dangerous place, and you few should start doing early preparations. Come, I will tell you some of the matters that need to take note. Zhang Shushu laughed, trouble Li senior brother. He turned back and beckoned, two senior sisters, quickly come over and listen too. Lu Shuiqi frowned, seemingly unwilling, but was pulled along by Wenmin who was next to her, walked over. Low voices echoed in the hall. In the depths of the 10,000 Great Mountains, leaving the last trace of darkness, crossing the last crooked old trees, Ghostly and Jin Pinger finally walked out of the Black Forest. Outside of the forest, the day had a rare warm sunshine, which warmly illuminated them, the ground and the crooked old trees but was unable to penetrate the mysterious and austere forest. Jin Pinger opened her arms to embrace the sun. Even though she had been through the forest once before, coming out still gave her a sense of relief. Indeed, days of walking through a forest full of poisonous insects and continuous rain would not put anyone in a good frame of mind. Standing outside the forest, the air which they breathed in was much warmer and comfortable. After Jin Pinger had her fill of deep breaths, she turned to look at Ghost Li. He had just walked out of the forest, with the usual look of indifference, but it was also obvious he had a look of relief. After a short rest, Ghost Li raised his head to look in the distance. With the rare good weather, the view of horizon widened. In the distance, there seemed like endless mountains, rolling and continuous, as far as the eye could see. Ghost Li's countenance changed slightly. Jin Pinger walked to his side, looked at him, laughed and said, why, did not expect the treacherous southern border to be actually so vast, right? When I first came here, I was also surprised. Ghost Li gazed into the distance, lingering on the mountains, and asked indifferently, the subdued devil ancient cave you mentioned, how far away is it? Jin Pinger coquettishly smiled, took 2 steps in front of Ghost Li and surveyed the endless mountains for a while, then pointed a finger at one of the hilltop which appeared strangely black from the summit and said, see that black mountain peak? Once we round that mountain top, the foot would be the location of the subdued devil ancient cave. Ghost Li raised his eyes, and saw the very strange mountain far away, always shrouded in a layer of light black mist as if there was no sunlight. It looked mysterious. Ghost Lee nodded his head and said, then let's go. At that, he moved forward. However, Jin Pinger did not follow, and instead stood in place. Ghost Lee took a few steps, sensing Jin Pinger did not keep up. Slightly surprised, he turned to look and asked, what's wrong? Jin Pinger rolled her eyes at him, but even through that resentful look, in the warm sunshine, still looked somewhat seductive. You are of course a great figure, but unfortunately the woman in front of you is weak, and unable to walk now. Ghost Lee said indifferently, considering all the women in the world, it won't be your turn to qualify as weak. Jin Pinger smiled sweetly and did not get angry, found a block of dry stone nearby and sat down. Even though Ghost Lee did not believe Jin Pinger, but on second thought realized that the last few days in the strange black forest, both of them did not have a good rest at all, and so he did not insist on hurrying and sat down near Jin Pinger. The monkey Xiao Wei, who had been lying on his shoulder, made GG calls and seemed to have awakened suddenly from its dispirited self, jumped down energetically from Ghost Lee's shoulder, looking around, blinking its 3 eyes non-stop and then sticking its tail up. It scuttled to the underbrush at the side, and in a flash, disappeared. Jin Pinger looked in its direction and asked, there is danger everywhere here, are you not worried about your monkey running around? Ghost Lee shook his head and said, it won't be harmed, even if the both of us were to meet with a mishap, that guy will be well. Jin Pinger giggled, covered her mouth and said, that guy, it's obviously only a monkey. Ghost Lee looked at Jin Pinger's lustrous like jade face, the corner of this mouth couldn't help but curl into a faint smile, then looked towards the direction where Xiao Wei went and slowly said, in my eyes, he is a much better than the countless people in this world. As Jin Pinger looked at his pale face, the smile on her face slowly disappeared. She gazed thoughtfully at Ghost Lee, who was frowning, a heavy emotion weighing his face. Perhaps, he found himself unexpectedly revealing something. Jin Pinger has always been an extremely intelligent woman, but she was definitely not those quiet and virtuous secular lady. She quietly watched Ghost Lee's face with soft eyes, but as she watched, his face turned more and more unhappy. As the moment became more and more awkward, and Ghost Lee's eyebrows frowned even more tighter, Jin Pinger suddenly asked, what's wrong? Startled, Ghost Lee said, what? Jin Pinger looked at him, with a ghost of a smile on her face, yet her eyes conveying a different emotion, softly asked, you seemed uncomfortable. Ghost Lee coughed once, and said, no. Jin Pinger appeared not to hear his answer, mused and said, is it because, in front of a woman like me, you've unexpectedly revealed some of the words in your heart, and that made you feel a little embarrassed? Ghost Lee's expression instantly turned cold, but before he could speak, Jin Pinger quickly spoke, this past decade, especially after Bai Yao incident, you have never traveled alone with a woman for this long, right? Inadvertently, after so many days of contact, there is less hostility between us, and your unguarded words made you feel that you have let her down. Ghost Lee stared at Jin Pinger, with cold eyes and said, what did you mean by all these, and, why did you mention Bai Yao? In the face of those icy threatening eyes, Jin Pinger displayed no fear, on the contrary, she smiled, her eyes seemed to be excited and said, you are afraid, aren't you? Ghost Lee jumped upright, and said angrily, what am I afraid of? If you continue with such nonsense, I will not be polite. You are afraid you will forget Bai Yao. Jin Pinger shouted, a clear sound like cutting through the snow, stabbing into the invisible ground between them. Ghost Lee opened his mouth in anger and froze, unable to make a sound, as if his vitals were attacked. Jin Pinger abruptly went silent, as the echoes of her words reverberated around them, their surroundings became quiet and still. At this moment, the sky was blue, the distant rolling mountains, a breeze seemed to be blowing from the horizon, the woods and grass nearby rustled. It was now afternoon. The wind blew across their faces. The sun turned more lazy, the two of them faced each other and were silent, no one spoke. Jin Pinger looked at the man in front of her, whose eyes were glistening with something, looking pitiful and yet looked like sneering. After a long while, she gently pulled a stray hair loosened by the wind to the back of her ear, and said with a gentle and light voice, for that feeling at that time, now even you don't even believe yourself, are you afraid of forgetting her subconsciously? Her smile was light, like a wild flower caressed by the wind, constantly repressing yourself, always reminding yourself, who would have imagined, Ghost King Sect's #1 great general Ghost Lee whom everyone fear, is such a pitiful man. Ghost Lee's expressions oscillated, between dark and white, suddenly he took a deep breath, looked up at the sky, pausing for a moment of breath and released it in a rush. When he looked back at her again, his face was as calm as usual, without the slightest hint of any color of emotions, completely indifferent. Who do you think you are? saying such things about me, how about yourself? He said with mock in his eyes, as if the earlier moment was completely forgotten. Jin Pinger smiled and said, me? I am nobody, only just a woman accompanying you now. Ghost Lee ignored the indistinct sarcasm in her words, turned his head, and suddenly the underbrush nearby parted and a gray shadow flashed. It was Xiao Wei who took a couple of jumps to Ghost Lee's side. At a closer look, the monkey was carefully clutching some kind of wild fruits, even its mouth was chewing non-stop. No wonder there was none of his familiar ZZ calls. Ghost Lee picked up Xiao Wei, extended an open palm, and Xiao Wei split his mouth in a grin before placing the wild fruits in Ghost Lee's hand. The wild fruits were adorable bright red things, and even though they weren't very big, they looked very plump and delicious. Ghost Lee took one into his mouth and chewed a couple of times. It tasted slightly underripe but very juicy and sweet, a rare thing to come by. Nodding his head, he separated a few of those fruits, looked at Jin Pinger, and handed her the fruits, saying, Xiao Wei has the innate ability to distinguish poison, so these wild fruits can be eaten. Jin Pinger did not immediately take the fruits offered, staring at his extended hand, smiled suddenly and said, by sharing the food with me, you won't be having more misgivings in your heart. Ghost Lee frowned, snorted, and his palms closed into a fist as he started to pull back. Unexpectedly at this moment, Jin Pinger reached out and grasped his hand, and said laughing, I want. Ghost Lee's expression changed slightly. He looked at Jin Pinger, slowly uncurled his fingers to reveal those few wild fruits. The palm skin was soft, from far, a faint aroma drifted in the breeze. At this moment, Jin Pinger's eyes seemed to soften, like a ripple in gently flowing water, stretched out her white long fingers, picking up the wild fruits from Ghost Lee's hand one by one. Slender fingers brushed casually against the rough skin, a warmness that carried a peculiar touch of cold. She stared at the man in front of her, gently and slowly let go of his hand, then smiled before placing a wild fruit in her mouth. Chewed a couple times and said smiling, it's delicious. Her smile, like the most beautiful flower blooming in the afternoon, was breathtaking. Ghost Lee gazed at her, silent. Jin Pinger's smile became more coquettish, and joked, what's wrong, you are not saying anything, standing there like a fool. Ghost Lee looked at Jin Pinger covering her mouth while smiling, but he remained quiet. After a moment, he suddenly said, Purple Light Sword is an extremely evil and vicious weapon, you are able to master it too. Pure yin return to pool, stage, and merging it with the energy vessels of your body, that is really an extraordinary feat. The wild fruits in Jin Pinger's hand suddenly burst, before the juices all spilled out, it had already turned into ice from the sudden strange chill and fell to the ground. The warm smile that was on Jin Pinger's disappeared, and instead now had eyes like daggers, staring sharply at the Ghost Lee. Ghost Lee instead did not seem to feel the hostility, and said lightly, just that although you are still a pure yin body and compatible with the purple light sword's spiritual energy, but the cold yin energy is too much and relying just only the yin, you instead forcefully cultivate, the yin energy penetrates your body, your meridians have all been damaged from it. Using this weapon naturally is very powerful, but in the future if you want to cultivate to the next level and become stronger, I'm afraid it is very difficult. As he finished, he ignored the animosity emanating from Jin Pinger, turned and started walking while calling out for the monkey. Xiao Wei, who was eating the wild fruits nearby, scuttled over and jumped onto his shoulder, and the two of them continued their journey towards that strange black mountain. Jin Pinger was left standing there, looking at their silhouettes slowly disappearing, and then she slowly raised her right hand, staring. In the sun, her white slender and beautiful palm shimmered like hidden precious stones, but from the deepest beneath the surface, although not obvious, one could see the indistinct unnatural light blue, like tiny veins scattered deep within the flesh. Jin Pinger's face was like cold water, suddenly snorted, without saying nothing, started walking towards the direction where Ghost Lee went. With her foot, she stepped heavily on the frozen wild fruits, smashing them into pieces. Chapter 196 Decisions. Southern border, 10,000's Great Mountains. Before the vast black forest which Ghost Lee and Jin Pinger had just traversed, stood a dozen people. Most of whom were Fenshang Valley's elite disciples, led by Li Xuan. Among them there were two outsiders, Lu Shuiqi and Zhang Shushu from Qingyun sect. As for Wen Min, who were with them earlier on, unexpectedly was missing. Amongst this delegation, many of them looked slightly exhausted, obviously although they were cultivated disciples, but entering deep into the unfathomable and dangerous 10,000's Great Mountains was still not an easy feat for them. Only the leader Li Xuan, as well as Lu Shuiqi and Zhang Shushu, who were all well skilled, looked like their usual selves. Unfortunately, staring at that dark and mysterious forest in front of them could not cheer anyone up. Above this stretch of black forest, the highly toxic miasma had risen. It was clear that traveling by the sky was not possible. With the black forest vast perimeter, it would be challenging to go around the forest. In addition, Li Xuan, who had taken the role as the guide, had been very clear that in accordance to the legends by the southern border natives, the beast deity's lair was in the subdued devil ancient cave just behind this dark forest. This forest, walking through it seemed to be their only path. A light blue light exuded from Tianya's celestial sword, gently flickering in Lu Shuiqi's hand, contrasting against her snow-white and lonely figure. Without Wen Min, not only did she rarely spoke to Li Xuan and the Fenshang Valley's disciples, even Zhang Shushu from the same sect, she also rarely took notice of. Throughout the journey, the barren hills and wild rivers, poisonous insects and ferocious beasts, all of which would have terrified most people, to her, it was often either ignoring them or striking them down with her sword. No one knew what her deepest inner thoughts were. Li Xuan did not know, and neither did Zhang Shushu. Li Xuan coughed discreetly towards Zhang Shushu and asked in a low voice, Zhang senior brother, may I ask what is Lu senior sister brooding over in silence all day? Zhang Shushu was nonplussed, smiled wryly, Li senior brother, I think you have asked the wrong person. Li Xuan glanced at him, after a long time shook his head and also made a wry laugh. At the moment everyone was worn out from the day and were resting to prepare for the journey through the black forest. Lu Shuiqi stood alone, far away on a rock, surveying the distant hills. Behind her, frequently there were many stares, intentionally or unintentionally lingering onto that delicate back figure. Li Xuan and Zhang Shushu stood aside, the former pondered and muttered to himself for a bit, before saying grimly, Zhang senior brother, we better invite Lu junior sister to come over and discuss our next steps carefully, is it good? Zhang Shushu nodded his head and agreed, that is a good idea. He then turned around and walked to Lu Shuiqi, spoke to her in a low voice. Lu Shuiqi remained expressionless, listening to Zhang Shushu. She then looked at Li Xuan. Li Xuan forced a small smile, feeling awkward. In a short while, Lu Shuiqi and Zhang Shushu walked over together. Li Xuan coughed once and started the conversation. It's like this, once we have crossed this section of Black Forest, we will be close to the lair of the beast deity. Li senior brother. Suddenly, Lu Shuiqi called Li Xuan, interrupting his words. Li Xuan was startled. Since entering the 10,000's great mountains, it could be said that this was the first time Lu Shuiqi spoke to him. In surprise, he asked, what is it? Lu Shuiqi looked at him, her eyes faintly glinting, said, for the past few days, I have something that I don't understand, and will like to ask Li senior brother. Li Xuan nodded his head and said, Lu junior sister, please go ahead. Lu Shuiqi's expression did not soften from Li Xuan's politeness, still asked in an icy manner, in the past, what we heard from Fenshang Valley, are all saying that this 10,000's great mountains is an extremely dangerous place, even you all rarely enter too. However, for some reason, on the way here, Lu senior brother you seem to be very familiar with this place, couldn't it be that you have been here before? And, the beast deity's tracks are extremely furtive, not to mention how hidden the location of the lair is. How would Fenshang Valley be so well informed and know such things? Li Xuan's expression remained unchanged in the face of Lu Shuiqi's interrogation, as if he was prepared. He smiled and responded, Lu junior sister, as I have told you earlier, in the past as Fenshang Valley indeed did not pay attention to the existence of this 10,000's great mountains, but when the catastrophe of demon beasts happened, it was only natural that we started paying attention to this place. As for the lair of the beast deity, it is discovered when our disciples pursued the remnants of the demon beasts, at the sacrifice of many of our best. Zhang Shushu and Lu Shuiqi frowned simultaneously. It was clear that this empty elaborated story did not convince them, but looking at him speaking so confidently, they were unable to directly refute the story and so could only remain silent. Li Xuan smiled, looked at the two of them, and said, speaking of which reminded me, that senior sister Wen Min from your honorable sect, before we were about to enter the 10,000's great mountains, suddenly had to return so abruptly to Qingyun sect. Surprised, Zhang Shushu couldn't help but glanced at Lu Shuiqi before replying with a smile, didn't we inform Li senior brother earlier, something urgent came up and senior sister Wen Min had no choice but to return. Standing by the side, Lu Shuiqi slightly cast her eyes downward, and did not speak. The reason Wen Min had to rush back to Qingyun sect, not even Zhang Shushu was not too clear about it. Actually to say it, naturally it was because of that day in the Mountain River Hall, when Yun Yilan abruptly asked the one question about the Zhu Xian ancient sword. Not knowing the truth, Zhang Shushu treated it as a joke and had forgotten about it, but after Lu Shuiqi and Wenmin discussed, decided that it was no trivial matter and in the end decided that Wenmin would rush back to Qingyun Mountain and report the news to the various elders and teacher uncles so as to be prepared for a change in situation. After all, to the Qingyun sect and the rest of the world, the significance of Zhu Xian ancient sword was too important. And Fenchong Valley, who previously always had good relations with Qingyun sect, and its leader Yun Yilan, the unexpected show this time, subtly revealed some stirrings which were worrying. However, the matter of the beast deity was also very important, and cannot be given up. So after deliberations, Wenmin would return back to the Qingyun mountain, and Lu Shuiqi with Zhang Shushu would remain. But in their minds, Fenchong Valley, this rich and powerful sect, at present seemed to be revealing its odd behaviors. At present, Li Xuan and Zhang Shushu had already been discussing for a while, making detailed plans for matters that required attention once they have entered the Black Forest. Through this conversation, Zhang Shushu learned many new unheard information about the Black Forest, a real opener to him, nodded continuously while engrossed in the conversation. Lu Shuiqi listened along, for some reason, felt slightly frustrated, stood up again and walked to the side, gazing off towards the horizon. In the distance, faint outlines of huge undulating mountains shaped the landscape under the wide blue sky, while cold wind whistled past them. Who knows what would be waiting for them ahead? Qingyun Mountain, Big Bamboo Valley. Early this day, at the first glimmer of light, while the Big Bamboo Valley disciples were not yet awake, light footsteps echoed from the observed silence hall. Contrary to his normal habits, Tian Buyi walked out, already dressed. The dawn's light illuminated his grave expression, the shadows formed by his frown hinted at the heavy thoughts in his mind. Suru followed from behind, and one could not tell if the couple woke up early or if they had not been able to sleep all night. Suru's face was lined with concern. As she walked out of observed silence hall, she first looked at the disciples' dormitory, saw that it peaceful as expected, spoke in a low voice, "Buyi, I still think what you are about to do is not right, we should discuss it further." Tian Buyi's face solemn, his eyebrows never seemed to relax once, replied in a deep voice, "This matter can no longer be delayed. Ever since we came back from the founder's ancestral hall, Reverend Dao Zhan Senior Brother's condition has been getting worse. Yesterday the news from Tongtian Peak, heard that he actually laid hands on Fan Elder and Xiao Yikai who went to persuade him." Suru, surprised, said, "What, why would sect head Senior Brother fight? How are the both of them? What provoked sect head Senior Brother? Was he hurt?" Tian Buyi grunted and said, "What else would they fight about? Naturally, when they noticed Dao Zhan's Senior Brother behaving strangely, they went forward to advise. I heard that Dao Zhan's Senior Brother was cordial at first, but I am unsure what caused the argument. With one palm strike, he immediately seriously injured Fan's Senior Brother. Luckily that kid Xiao Yikai was quick-witted enough and managed to escape in time." Suru, startled, frowned and asked, "Xiao Yikai was actually all right?" Tian Buyi clasped his hands behind and pondered for a moment before saying, "He has always been smart, and he had been following Dao Zhan's Senior Brother for so many years, more or less he knows him better than most. Most likely he realized early that something was amiss and took the opportunity, therefore managed to get away in time. But it was also fortunate that he was quick-witted, he could then save Fan's Senior Brother and entreated him, or who knows what would have happened." Suru was silent for a long while, uncertainty and concern mixed in her expression. He has already changed until like this, why do you still insist on visiting him?" Tian Buyi took a deep breath, and said, "It doesn't matter that others don't understand, don't tell me you don't understand why too." Suru quietly said, "But sect head Senior Brother right now has been possessed by the demons, no one knows what he is actually thinking anymore, and he is so highly skilled, far stronger and better skilled than you and I. Now that you taking the risk by going, I'm afraid that. Towards the end, her voice dropped increasingly lower until it was barely above a whisper and she stopped, evidently unwilling to give voice to her fear. Tian Buyi released a heavy sigh, turned around to gaze at Suru and stretched out his hand to gently hold her delicate hands, and said gently, "We have been married for so many years, of course I know what you are worrying about. With you worrying like that for me, even if something were to happen to me, it doesn't matter anymore." Suru frowned and interrupted him exclaiming, "What nonsense are you saying?" Tian Buyi nodded his head, and after a moment, continued, "As you know, Zhu Xian ancient sword's secret is Qingyun sect's highest classified, and initially only the sect head knew of this. However, at that Wildlands battle, I, Zheng Shuchong and the rest following Wang Jianyi's senior brother into the decisive battle of 1,000 Miles Changsha, chanced upon this secret by coincidence. Afterwards, we stood in the founder's ancestral hall and in front of the Qingyun ancestral shrines made a solemn vow, never to reveal this secret to anyone for the rest of our lives. Suru sighed and said, "Why are you mentioning this again? I was there that day and made the vow as well, how could I not remember?" Tian Buyi awe-inspiringly said, "Ever since Qingyi founder left a commandment tablet written personally, generations of our ancestors had warned repeatedly that the Zhu Xian ancient sword cannot be used lightly. In Qingyi founder's tablet, it even more clearly state that the soul of the ancient sword is extremely terrible and vicious, and if the welder is not of strong mind and stable foundations, they will fall into the devil's path. Now that Dao Zan's senior brother is showing those various signs, wouldn't it be proving exactly what the forefathers predicted to happen?" Suru bowed her head and was silent for a long while. Tian Buyi raised his head to gaze at the brightening sky. In the distance the early morning mountain fog surrounded the summits, where the clouds shrouded, lofty towering Tongtian Peak could be seen indistinctly. Over the years, Dao Zan's senior brother spared no effort, reorganized Qingyun sect and made it prospered, till today we are able to regard the world with disdain, lead the world's good faction. Tian Buyi's voice changed, suddenly turned heavy with emotions. "I remember thinking, that if Wang Jianyi's senior brother takes the position of sect head, I guessed he wouldn't be as good as Dao Zan's senior brother." Suru trembled and whispered, "Buyi," but lost her voice as she hesitated to finish what she wanted to say. Tian Buyi clasped his hands behind, looking frustrated and said, "In these many years, even though I am still secretly making offering to Wang's senior brother's memorial tablet, but to Dao Zan's senior brother, honestly, I was feeling more and more admiration, although we argued mostly but as to how he handled matters and his conduct, I have nothing to say, even if 10 years ago, when he used the Zhu Xian ancient sword to strike Lao Qi." "Buyi, stop talking!" Suru suddenly shouted. For some reason, as she stared at Tian Buyi, her eyes turned red. Tian Buyi's face muscles twitched, and tried to force a smile, but it only revealed his heartache. "In this world, only you understand me. That war 10 years ago, he released a long sigh, and said, I still miss Lao Qi. Amongst the disciples, even though he was the most displeasing to the eye, but I still, alas." In the wake of his long sigh, the two of them fell silent. After a while, Tian Buyi smiled bitterly and said, "After that day, I was once deeply resentful towards Dao Zan's senior brother. Lao Qi is brought up by me, those decades, wouldn't I have known what kind of a person he is? If there is any wrongdoing, it would also be me to teach him, who knows, maybe we would be able to turn the situation around. But with that strike, before Lao Qi, Bai Yao was first struck to death, and then that is just great, Lao Qi who didn't rebel, would also have to rebel. With his stubborn temper, his entire life is destroyed with that sword strike. However, in the past few years, when I reflected at times, recalled this matter, I once thought, if I was in Dao Zan's senior brother's position, that sword strike, would I have struck, or not?" Suru looked at her husband, said nothing, but gently grasped his hand and patted his palm, offering silent comfort. Tian Buyi smiled faintly, looked at Suru, smiled and said, "If it were me, I'm afraid in the end I would still have delivered that strike." As if she already knew the answer, Suru lowered her head and said nothing. Tian Buyi fell silent, staring at the direction of the distant Tongtian Peak. After a long while, Suru said abruptly, "Since your mind has been decided, why don't I accompany you to visit Dao Zan's senior brother?" Tian Buyi shook his head and said, "It would be better if you don't go, it would be hard to talk with so many people. Dao Zan's senior brother turning into what he is today, is all because of what he did it for the good of humankind and Qingyun sect. If I didn't know, that would have been it, but I have been privy to the secret and I cannot now in good conscience sit idly by and do nothing. I have to go and see if there's any chance of help for him. Only hope that Dao Zan's senior brother with his deep cultivation, will be able to wake from the vicious currents. Otherwise," he ended abruptly. Suru looked at him, smiled suddenly, wiping away the sadness and grief on her face, replacing it with a tender loving expression, gently said, "All right, that's enough." Tian Buyi and Suru had been together for a long time, both understood each other perfectly. At this moment, he just gazed at Suru for a long while, saying nothing, only nodded his head. The next moment, he turned, flung his sleeves, red lights started to flash out. Watching as his red celestial sword was on the verge of travel, Suru was suddenly behind him, again called out, Buyi, although the tone was soft, it was filled with love and tenderness, and it was conveyed in those two short words. Tian Buyi turned back to look at his wife, and saw the reluctance on Suru's face and the tears in her eyes. After a long moment, Tian Buyi smiled and waved. His lips twitched but he said nothing, turned and wielded the red celestial sword, with a shout, leapt into the air. That scarlet flash of light swept across the horizon and into the clouds. At first the clouds billowed and made way but soon shrouded from all directions, gradually submerging his silhouette. Only Suru was left, staring at the sky in a daze. She stood there for a long time, until dewdrops formed on her hair, the pearls sparkling in the sun as it falls quietly onto the ground. Chapter 197 Footprints. The Black Mountain Summits. After setting foot on the mountain, a strong smell wafted through the air. It was choking, with a taste of sulfur. Ghost Li and Jin Pinger were both strongly skilled, and were still able to tolerate the smell, but as they gradually walked deeper into the mountain, the yin wind which became stronger, slowly made their eyebrows knitted together. The bone-chilling wind, for some reason, when it brushed across their faces, although it was not a strong gust, its ghastly air made one shivered from deep within the heart. In addition, the faint hissing sound heard from deep within the summit ahead, undulating, sudden high and low, at times like a monkey crying in the night, and other times as if violent demons were laughing in misery, inciting panic in all who heard it. Xiao Wei the monkey was crouching on Ghost Li's shoulder, after munching on the last wild fruit, flung the pit aside and looked around with his 3 eyes, seemingly oblivious to the strangeness of his surrounding. Jin Pinger's frown deepened and said suddenly, "Something doesn't seem right." Surprised, Ghost Li stopped and asked, "What is it?" Jin Pinger hesitated before responding, "When I was last tracking here, there were no wails or howls or gusts of yin wind. It was after reaching the Subdue Devil Ancient Cave then I encountered some of this. How did this place turn into Netherworld like in just a short period of time?" Ghost Li looked off into the distance and said indifferently, "Maybe it is because this is the beast deity's lair, the evil aura is too heavy, as it should be. When you first came he was just resurrected, and naturally there was no such aura." Jin Pinger thought it through, perhaps that was the only explanation. The day at Qingyun Hill, the beast deity's bloody battle with Zhu Xian ancient sword, he was seriously injured by the sword, everyone saw how powerful the sword was. However the beast deity still managed to escape. With that level of power, it already shocked the world. Jin Pinger's eyes moved, said abruptly, "Say, if we really do find the beast deity in the Subdue Devil Ancient Cave, even though he has been wounded, but with just the both of us, do you think we would be able to deal with him?" Ghost Li shook his head and said, "How would I know?" Jin Pinger looked at him and laughed suddenly, "Looking at you, seems like you are not confident, huh? That being the case, why did you still follow me here?" She looked at Ghost Li. "Don't forget, in the majestic Fox Mountain, there is still a Bai Yao waiting for you to save her. If you die here, wouldn't you be letting her down?" Ghost Li snorted and walked forward, saying, "Her father commanded me to do this, I owe Bai Yao too much, I have to do something, but you." He laughed coldly and said, "If you do unfortunately die here, I guess that will really be dying with grievances isn't it?" Jin Pinger laughed coquettishly, smiling to his back, "Iya. You this person is so formal, as long as we die together, be it beast deity's lair or a cattle pen, that is also good." Ghost Li who was walking ahead he coldly laughed, obviously he did not believe a single word of Jin Pinger, let alone being moved by the performance. He merely continued walking. The monkey on his shoulder instead turned his head to look at Jin Pinger, splitting into a rare grin, seemingly in a good mood. Different from those ladies who used to associate with Ghost Li, Xiao Wei did not treat Jin Pinger as affectionate as how he treated Xiao Bai, Xiao Huan, in the days they spent together. This happy grin he showed was the first. Jin Pinger was somehow surprised, but it was after all not a bad thing, so she was rather happy. With a smiling expression, she was about to step ahead to tease the monkey who was just smiling when he suddenly opened his mouth, spat out a black thing, extremely fast, shot towards Jin Pinger. Jin Pinger was shocked, but she was not an ordinary person. She did not panic. Exerting force from her foot, she spun her body to the side by a few degrees to let the strange thing fly past her. With a muffled pop, that thing hit the ground. It did not ricochet and instead smashed right into the ground. Jin Pinger turned to look. It was the pit of a wild fruit. It seemed like he had been sucking on one for flavor and decided to use it to play a trick on her now. Played by a monkey, Jin Pinger was furious, her face also turned pale slightly. She glared sideways but saw that the grey monkey had already turned his body around and sat on Ghost Li's shoulder, facing her, his arms around his chest, both of his legs swinging, and his three eyes staring at the sky, a face full of arrogance, showing in abundance the legendary hoodlum spirit. Even his tail was swinging back and forth, as if he was saying, yes, I am bullying you, I am a gangster and I am not afraid. If she had not looked up to see that, she might not have been as angry. When she saw that, she strode up furiously to Ghostly and yelled, "This monkey of yours is such an ill-mannered monkey, do you know it was spitting pits at people?" Ghostly slowly turned around and looked at Jin Pinger strangely. "Are you scolding him?" he asked, pointing at Xiao Wei. Jin Pinger nodded. Xiao Wei immediately got angry. He jumped up from Ghostly's shoulder screeching, his three eyes wide open and both his hands clenched in tight fists, gesturing a fight. It seemed like it was burning with rage, and wanted to fight Jin Pinger who had came to complain. Jin Pinger did not expect this gray-furred monkey would learn to be so human, and took a step back in surprise. She ignored him and turned to yell at Ghostly, "I am scolding him, this animal is just too vile. Raising him means you have to teach him manners." "You!" shouted Ghostly suddenly, at Xiao Wei, simultaneously interrupting Jin Pinger. Xiao Wei jumped in shock, and paused. Jin Pinger was also surprised, staring at Ghostly. Ghostly frowned with a grave expression, and said to Xiao Wei, "I told you before, to read more books, knowledge brings reason, but you wouldn't listen. When I taught you that book less than divine and evil greater than, why did you not learn? Return and make 300 copies of it before coming back to see me." Xiao Hui's three eyes stared wide open, blinked a couple of times and touched his head with his hands. He scratched and pawed his head, stupefied. On the other side, Jin Pinger was not any better. Recovering from her shock, she could not help but sneered, "What nonsense are you talking about? Even if this monkey did learn to be more human, it won't be able to read or write." Ghostly turned to glance at her. "Oh," he said, as if he had just come to realize that. He said indifferently, "If that is the case, even you also say it so, then this monkey with no manners is not my fault. Heaven create all living things, why can't a monkey to learn to read, why?" He looked at Jin Pinger, sighed with a complete lack of sincerity, said nothing and resumed his walk. Jin Pinger was so furious her face had turned even paler. The monkey Xiao Wei fell off Ghostly's shoulder with a plop on the ground, but he did not look like he was in pain. Instead he was screeching, howling with laughter, at times holding his sides as if he was about to split from laughing, and other times beating the ground, and even lying on the ground facing the sky, its tail dancing, in short laughing more and more crazily. Jin Pinger became even angrier. Right when she was about to flare up, Xiao Wei jumped up and rushed towards her making GGG. He made a big face at her and then scurried his way back to Ghostly's shoulder. Once settled, he stared back towards Jin Pinger with a smug look before making another face at her. Jin Pinger was so angry she was trembling. Gritting her teeth, she raised her arm forward. In the warm sun, the edge of her palm emitted a strange purple light. However, the arm was only raised halfway before it stopped. In the silhouette of the male ahead, there seemed to be a faint green light emitting from his hand. Jin Pinger's pupils contracted. After a long while, she stomped her feet abruptly and lowered her arm. She then closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her chest rising up and fell a couple of times before she regained her composure. The green flare from Ghostly further ahead dispersed slowly as well. His shadow, along with the gray-furred three-eyed monkey's sharp crazed laughter, moved further and further away. Jin Pinger looked calm but still carried a touch of anger inside, but also for some reason, her face turned a bit flushed. She had always bewitched people and toying with the wills of people were her pastime. To be played like this by a monkey today. She grunted, dispersing those thoughts. As she was about to start walking, she frowned suddenly, as if she thought of something else. She turned and walked back slowly. Within a short distance, she had arrived at the spot where Xiao Wei spat the pit to provoke her. The fruit pit was part of the fruits commonly grown in this area, and there were nothing strange about that. However, that particular pit was almost completely buried, with only a small part of the shell visible. This strange black mountain was different from the other areas of the 10,000 great mountains where the ground had loose soil. Instead, the ground here was solid rocks. Xiao Hui's spit force was actually strong enough to embed the pit into the rock. Jin Pinger frowned deepened, slowly stood up, and looked toward the direction where Ghostly's silhouette disappeared. The yin breeze blowing from that direction seemed to still carry monkey Xiao Hui's piercing crazed laughter. Muttering in a low voice to herself, how could even the monkey also have such skills to be able to progress so fast? Who is this person? The vast black forest, again welcomed new visitors. Only this time the number of guests were far more than ever before. A platoon of troops advanced through the forest, marching through the thicket and the clusters of thorns. However, on this part of the journey, other than the unexpected zero attacks by ferocious beasts, it was also unexpectedly smooth. Leading the group were several unordinary people. Lu Shuiqi frowned and said nothing, but Zhang Shushu could stand it no longer and burst out at Li Xuan, Li's senior brother, there is something wrong here. Li Xuan stopped, glanced around before looking at Zhang Shushu. He pondered a moment before calling out to the Fenshang Valley disciples, we will take a rest here before continuing our journey. Everyone cheered in agreement, evidently the long march was difficult. Having settled the others, Li Xuan and Zhang Shushu walked a short distance aside, towards Lu Shuiqi. Whereas Lu Shuiqi frowned and took a step back. Li Xuan's expression dropped, and Zhang Shushu, being quick-witted, took the opportunity to interrupt, Li's senior brother, you realized it too. Li Xuan nodded his head, his gaze on the feet of the three of them, among the exuberant thorny undergrowth. Although vague, it was still faintly visible that after the thorns were cut broken, the faint impression of somebody stepping over them. Someone was here before us, and certainly not long ago, walked through this part of the forest too. He was sure, and his forehead was creased with worry he couldn't hide. Zhang Shushu thought, and asked, could it be Li's senior brother, your sect? Li Xuan shook his head, impossible, Fenshang Valley only has this team entering 10,000's great mountains, most of the valley younger generation elites are here, and there will be no one else joining us. Zhang Shushu frowned and said, that's strange, according to Yun Master Valley, this news should not have been leaked. Could it be that other sects got to know of this news and ventured into the 10,000's great mountains? Li Xuan hesitated, then shook his head and said, I don't believe so. First of all, this matter is indeed still a secret, so only our two sects know. He coughed lightly before saying in a low voice, Beast Deity is the cause of the catastrophe. If there were others trying to take advantage of the situation to finish the kill, then what our two sects fought tooth and nail for at Qingyun Hill, wouldn't it be? Zhang Shushu reached out a hand and patted Li Xuan's shoulder, laughed and said, I agree, Li's senior brother, great minds truly think alike. Ha ha, ha ha ha. They studied each other and laughed. Just then, a derisive snort came the side. It was from Lu Shuiqi. The two, surprised, turned to look at her. Zhang Shushu asked in a low voice, Lu's senior sister, what is with you, did we say something wrong? Lu Shuiqi gave him a cold look, turned her head away and sneered, what a repulsive countenance. Zhang Shushu was stunned, for a moment did not understand the meaning of Lu Shuiqi's words. He was unsure if she was scolding him or Li Xuan, or perhaps might as well the both of them. He turned his head to look at Li Xuan, and the two looked at each other uncomfortably while they felt the awkwardness, unsure of what to say. After a moment, after all, Zhang Shushu was more thick-skinned, made a ha-ha, pretended he had heard nothing, spoke to Li Xuan, Li's senior brother, since the news has not spread and it isn't other disciples from Fenshang Valley, then there is something very odd about these tracks. Li Xuan frowned, clearly thinking hard. As he was just about to speak, Lu Shuiqi turned back towards them and said coldly, Beast Deity. Zhang Shushu and Li Xuan stood shocked, their expressions full of disbelief. After a while, Zhang Shushu nodded slowly. Though there was still some hesitation, he said, this, even though what Lu's senior sister said was wild, but thinking about it, it indeed is possible. Li Xuan's expression was contrary to Zhang Shushu. He looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated and shook his head. Forget it, let's continue on and keep a lookout. Speculating here would not do anybody any good. Continuing, he said to the two of them, you two should rest, I will check in on my juniors. Zhang Shushu nodded and said, Li's senior brother, please go ahead. After cautioning them to be careful, Li Xuan turned to walk to the back. Once Li Xuan had walked far enough, Zhang Shushu turned his head towards Lu Shuiqi's back, smiled and said, Lu's senior sister, could it be that you were scolding me earlier? Lu Shuiqi let out a disdainful snort, neither admitting or denying the truth of that statement. By doing that, she seemed to giving tacit agreement. Zhang Shushu forced a laugh, walked slowly to Lu Shuiqi's side and spoke in a low voice, Lu's senior sister, there is something I would like to ask you. Lu Shuiqi glanced at him and was surprised. Zhang Shushu looked very serious, and that was very unusual. Immediately, she asked, what? Zhang Shushu took a deep breath, looked around before whispering, Lu's senior sister, tell me honestly. Our sect's Zhu Xian ancient sword, is it truly damaged? Lu Shuiqi face paled to a white color, a gleam in her eyes flashed, stared at Zhang Shushu. Even her Tianya celestial sword, that faint blue glow like autumn waters, seemed to be buzzing, stretching the moment, before returning. Zhang Shushu's expression changed, felt as if the woman in front of him seemed to be ice a moment ago, now seemed to have become as sharp as a needle. He involuntarily took a step back and whispered, "Lu's senior sister, there is no need for this." Lu Shuiqi stared coldly at him. "You asking this question, what is the meaning of it?" Zhang Shushu smiled lightly and said, "I am also a disciple of Qingyun sect, how would I not be concerned about such a matter? Wen Min senior sister's hasty return, most likely is to report this matter back to the various teachers, isn't it?" Lu Shuiqi said nothing, just continued to stare at him coldly. Zhang Shushu nodded, all right, Lu's senior sister, look, I have no bad intention, just that there are some things that happened within this period which are highly suspicious, there isn't much opportunities along the journey to discuss this with you, so I am taking advantage of this moment now." Lu Shuiqi looked at him, "What kind of things?" Zhang Shushu coughed once before whispering, "What kind of a person do you think Fenshang Valley's leader Yun Yilin is?" Lu Shuiqi frowned, "What do you mean?" Zhang Shushu smiled lightly and said, "Let's say it like this, do you think Yun Master Valley is a simple-minded person? Or how about a person who hates evil and make the world's good faction as his responsibility, doesn't guard against fellow good faction Qingyun disciples at all?" Lu Shuiqi snorted and said nothing, but her disdain expression revealed her words, evidently disagreeing completely with Zhang Shushu's questions. Zhang Shushu was not angry, it seemed he already knew Lu Shuiqi would react this way. He continued, "Since we all know that Yun Master Valley is not a warm-hearted compassionate or of a simple mind, then on that day in the Mountain River Hall when he abruptly asked the three of us about Zhu Xian ancient sword being damaged, isn't that strange?" Lu Shuiqi took a deep breath, and looked at Zhang Shushu without saying a word. Zhang Shushu was a little embarrassment, and said, "All right. I know speaking bad things about a highly respected elder behind his back is indeed inappropriate. However, you see, thinking back about these matters, things are somewhat strange. There is nothing inappropriate about it." Lu Shuiqi clear and cold voice cut in, seemed couldn't be bothered about Zhang Shushu's slightly ajar mouth, coldly said, "What's said is said, what's the apprehension for? From Qingyun Hill till date, he is not a so-called good person too." Zhang Shushu was both surprised and amused, and was speechless at that moment. He never would have dreamed that the proper and inflexible Lu Shuiqi was actually more iconoclastic than himself, directly saying aloud her contempt for a highly respected senior of prestige and reputation. However, on reflection, this quiet and exquisite incomparable beauty, with that highly respected senior and his disciples, seemed to really have quite a history between them. Looking at Lu Shuiqi, Zhang Shushu for some reason, felt a chill on the back of his neck. His intuition made him question, has he inadvertently kicked the hornet's nest? He coughed at once, hurrying to change the topic. Let's not be concerning ourselves with his moral standing. I mean, this matter, Yun Master Valley at least have several areas of unusualness. How did he know about the damage to Zhu Xian ancient sword? That's one. Lu Shuiqi interrupted, her expression did not change, but her eyes revealed a trace of glint, like dazzling crystals. Second, once he knew, why did he tell us? He knew very well that once this news is revealed by himself, we would have to report it to Qingyun various teachers. In that case, wouldn't the relationship between Fenshang Valley and Qingyun sect change immediately? Zhang Shushu nodded repeatedly, and said, I knew with Lu's senior sister's intelligence, definitely will not overlook these crucial matters. He paused for a moment before continuing, according to this then, there are only two possibilities. First, Qingyun sect has a spy that is supplying him with information. He knew news that even me this Qingyun disciple was not privy to, which means that the spy has a considerable position. However, with his reveal, wouldn't it expose that spy's identity? Lu Shuiqi snorted, and said, second, what is the purpose of him telling us? To remind Qingyun sect that he already knew this secret, or to warn the various teachers, that Fenshang Valley is no longer afraid of Qingyun sect. Zhang Shushu looked intensely at Lu Shuiqi, sighed and said, that was what I was thinking too, turns out you have been thinking the same too. To think I wanted to remind you. But on reflection, when you asked when Min's senior sister returned back to Qingyun, it was to report these matters to the various teachers, right? Lu Shuiqi was silent, and merely nodded her head. The corner of Zhang Shushu's twitched, and he abruptly released a long sigh filled with sorrow. Startled, Lu Shuiqi asked, "What's with you?" Zhang Shushu laughed bitterly, and said, I was sighing about our sect Zhu Xian ancient sword. Frankly, these few days even though I have arrived at this conclusion, but my heart wanted to deny it so badly. I was hoping I was wrong. Lu Shuiqi said nothing, but turned her head quietly to stare into the distance. The depths of the forest were dark and secretive, the path ahead without the smallest bit of light. Zhang Shushu released a long breath, shook his head and said, "Forget it, thinking about it won't be of any use. We can only take it a step at a time. I wonder, what exactly has Yun Valley Master got up his sleeve?" Lu Shuiqi did not answer, her gaze unconsciously drawn back to the faint tracks they had found earlier. Zhang Shushu whispered from the side, "Actually what you said about the beast deity although is possible, I don't think it is him." Lu Shuiqi responded, "Then who do you think it is?" Zhang Shushu pondered a moment, and whispered, "If what that Li Xuan said was true, if it's really not their own Fenshang Valley disciples, I am afraid that these tracks would most likely be from evil sect's remaining members." Lu Shuiqi jolted and turned her head, the beautiful complexion was marred with emotions for the first time. "Why do you say so?" Zhang Shushu pointed to the tracks, and said, "You see, although these tracks are fuzzy, but it is clear that these are made by humans. If Fenshang Valley disciples never came here before, then there are no other sects in good faction that is as familiar with the 10,000 great mountains. It is difficult to imagine that they would be able to track to this point. But evil sect is different. That year after the big war, evil sect was driven out by the good fraction. Such an hospitable natural environment like this, most likely they would have come before. So I think it is highly possible that it's them. What do you say, Lu senior sister?" Zhang Shushu turned around and asked, but when he saw Lu Shuiqi's expression, he couldn't help but stare in shock. That beautiful woman was staring at the tracks in a daze, her face pale with a faint blush, emanating deep from within the skin and faintly captivating. In the middle of this desolated and cold ancient forest, she stood there woodenly, as if she had been sucked into a particular strange dream, and was no longer able to hear the people next to her. Chapter 198 Old Haunts. Qingyun Hill, Tong Tian Peak, Founder's Ancestral Hall. The lush green trees in the grove were the same as before, dense and full of vitality. The light morning mist drifted slowly across the forest, branches and tree leaves everywhere. Above the wild flowers' petals in the grasses, crystal dewdrops trembled gently in the breeze. In the distance, melodious and beautiful birdsong traveled out from the depths of the jungle. Hearing it, it cleared one's body and heart, like being in paradise. In this secular scenic place, Taoism-like celestial atmosphere, a short and stout figure slowly appeared on the small path in the forest. It was Tian Buyi. The surrounding scenery seemed somewhat in disharmony to Tian Buyi's grave expression, his eyes staring straight ahead, his face reflecting his heavy heart. At this moment, there was not a single soul beside him, and that was a little strange. Although Tian Buyi as Big Bamboo Valley leader, was also one of the very important figures of Qingyun sect, but visiting Tong Tian Peak's sacred founder's ancestral hall privately given his status, it was also clearly strange. Along the mountain road, there were no Qingyun disciples keeping watch, there was only silence along the way. Amongst the birdsong in the light wind, Tian Buyi passed through that famous trifurcated path, gradually saw the majestic cornices deep in the forest. Dang! A light bell sounded from an unknown location, from the direction of the mountain ahead, echoing around Qingyun Hill. That hollow fading echo made Tian Buyi stopped in his tracks, turned back and surveyed the scene. The firmament, the sky was also limitless blue. Thousands and thousands of years, as if it had never changed. Tian Buyi's face gradually turned solemn, silently stood silent for a while, and then again turning back and continued on his journey to Founder's ancestral hall once more. The massive stone steps revealed in front of him, the Founder's ancestral hall was still the same, like a giant sleeping gently in the arms of the forest. The hall's big doors remained opened as before, the interior still dusky, even the specks of light emanating from the joss sticks and candles seemed to also be in a deep sleep. Everything was so peaceful. Only that, outside this Founder's ancestral hall, at the bottom of the steps, stood a young man with his back to Tian Buyi. Tian Buyi frowned and walked over. Hearing the footsteps, the young man was surprised. He was not expecting anyone to visit at this time. He turned around quickly. Tian Buyi came face to face with the young man, and they were both shocked. That young man was Lin Jingyu. Tian Buyi immediately called to mind the previous conversations he heard from his disciples that Lin Jingyu had been keeping watch here in Founder's ancestral hall. It was said that he was keeping vigil for someone, but as to who that someone was, no one seemed to know. However, Tian Buyi was not in the mood at present to ponder over this. The two of them were not on good terms, and as they looked at each other, they did not speak immediately. The atmosphere became a little awkward. In the end, Lin Jingyu coughed once and asked in a low voice, "Tian teacher uncle, why are you here at such an early hour?" Tian Buyi glanced at him before moving his gaze to the darkness of the founder's ancestral hall, and said, "I am here looking for someone." "What are you doing standing outside the hall so early in the morning?" Lin Jingyu's expression changed slightly, and a trace of bitter smile seemed to flit across his face. He glanced at the founder's ancestral hall, and did not answer. Tian Buyi asked lightly, "Is there someone inside? Is it sect head senior brother?" Lin Jingyu nodded and said, "Yes, sect head teacher uncle is in the main hall. He ordered me to wait outside. Without his call, not a single Tong Tian Peak disciple is allowed to enter." Tian Buyi snorted and asked coldly, "I remember you are still Longshou Valley Branch's disciple. Why did you come over to Tong Tian Peak here and instead look after the branch for Daozan's senior brother?" Lin Jingyu turned white, his head hung low and did not speak. Tian Buyi ignored him, lifted his leg and stepped up the stairs. Lin Jingyu was surprised, hurried forward and said, "Tian teacher uncle, what are you doing?" Tian Buyi said indifferently, "I came here, naturally as to enter. I am looking to discuss some things with sect head senior brother." Lin Jingyu frowned and said, "Tian teacher uncle, sect head teacher uncle said that he did not want to see anyone, without his permission, no one from Tong Tian Peak." "I am not a disciple of Tong Tian Peak." Tian Buyi interrupted Lin Jingyu coldly. Lin Jingyu stopped, momentarily made speechless by Tian Buyi. Tian Buyi said nothing more, walked up the stone steps and towards the hall. Lin Jingyu jerked, as if he still wanted to block Tian Buyi, but then he stopped, stared at that short and stout figure, his eyes glimmering. Stepping over the high threshold, a faint smell of sandalwood enveloped, the huge shadows from deep inside the hall effusing out, lightly blocking the bright light from entering Founder's ancestral hall. Tian Buyi stood in place for a moment before making his way slowly into the depths of the hall. His footsteps unhurried, his expression slowly changing. Immense red-painted pillars scattered throughout the hall, supporting the majestic building. The yellow curtains hanging down from the ceiling draped quietly beside the pillars, many of which looked old and worn. Looking at it, that fading yellow revealed out a feeling of vicissitudes of life. It was as if the past was frozen here. The hall was very quiet, there was almost no sound except for Tian Buyi's footsteps reverberating into the shadows. Behind the huge altar table in the distance, numerous light specks from the candles burned silently, like many strange and mysterious eyes watching the figure walking in the shadows of the hall. Turning past the thickest pillar in the hall, walking past the hanging yellow banners, Tian Buyi finally stopped. There was an open space in front of him, with 3 rows of praying mats on the ground, each row 7 mats. In the middle mat of the first row, a familiar figure sat, unmoving. In front of the mat, a massive altar table stood with a spread of offerings of fruits. In the middle, a big incense pot. Strangely, there was only 3 joss sticks, their smoke rising in slow spirals. Through the smoke surrounding the table, in the heavy darkness behind the table, the countless spiritual tablets could be vaguely seen, each of which seemed to have writings properly written on the tablets in the shadows. Tian Buyi's expression slowly became heavy with a trace of respectfulness, facing the ancestors of Qingyun sect. His eyes first rested for a moment at that once familiar back figure, and then quietly walked up. Reverend Daozan's body slightly moved, but did not look back. Tian Buyi slowly walked to the altar table, looked at the numerous tablets shrouded in the shadows, inhaled deeply, and then from the incense pack next to the incense burner, took out 3 thin incenses out, carefully lighted them up from candle beside, stepped back, standing 3 kai before the altar, respectfully held the incenses and bowed 3 times. Where Reverend Daozan sat, was only 6 kai from the altar, but that faint light ahead seemed unable to illuminate where he was. In the dim shadows, he slowly looked up. Tian Buyi's figure stood back facing him. In that darkness, suddenly, like the ghost fires of the netherworld, Wu leapt up, 2 bright glints instantly shone. And almost at the same time, like an invisible ghost whale sweeping through the hall, all of the incenses and candles, other than Tian Buyi's ones, all brightened up. Tian Buyi right now had finished his prayers, stepped up and was about to insert the sticks into the burner, but his body suddenly stopped. Even the hand holding the incense also paused in the air. Inside the hall, instantly fell into a dead silence, two figures, one standing one sitting, as if frozen, motionless. The distant yellow curtains, for some reason, as if a breeze was blowing past the hall, gently fluttered a few times, and slowly stopped. Outside the hall, Lin Jingyu was frowning and pondering, but suddenly sensing something, abruptly looked up, looked over at the silent and dim hall, a faint surprise on his face. In the confusion, the hall, which had been in slumber, like a strange beast being awakened, coldly opened its eyes. And for an unknown amount of time, the mysterious ghost fires in Reverend Daoshuan's eyes suddenly disappeared, it appeared and disappeared suddenly. Following which the eyes slowly closed, the malevolent atmosphere immediately also died down, the surrounding fires, gradually lost their brightness, resumed their original faint lights. The incenses in Tian Buyi's hands continued to burn with its smoke rising in spirals, the three lit thin incenses were faintly discernible in the dark. Just that when the thin sticks trembled, white ash like white cotton fell softly onto Tian Buyi's hand. Tian Buyi appeared indifferent, glanced coldly at the ashes on the back of his hand, stood silently for a moment, shook his hand gently to get rid of the ash, and then stepped forward, respectfully inserted his 3 incense sticks in the incense burner. The 6 fragrant incense sticks, burned in the incense burner at the same time, light smoke gently drifted, raising in slow spirals. Tian Buyi said nothing, bowed 3 times facing the memorial tablet, paying his respects, and then, he turned slowly to face the figure sitting upright on the praying mat. Reverend Dao Zan's senior brother. He stared deeply at that man, for some reason, his eyes had surprise, grief and indistinct anguish, said slowly, "We meet again." Most of Reverend Daoshuan's face was shrouded in the darkness and was indistinct. At Tian Buyi's words, however, he seemed to have turned a deaf ear and had no reaction, still sitting quietly. Tian Buyi stood there and looked at him for a short while, said nothing, but his expression turned increasingly heavy. The corner of his mouth twitched. He strided towards Reverend Daoshuan's, at a prayer mat less than 3 kai away, and also sat down. In the hall, silence. Southern border, 10,000 great mountains, the black burnt mountain summit. Along the journey, the sinister ghostly wails became increasingly unnerving, the yin wind that came from nowhere was also howling incessantly and felt like knives on the skin. If it wasn't because Ghost Li and Jin Pinger were both highly skilled, just these wailing and bone-chilling winds would have driven them mad. The surrounding sinister atmosphere intensified, the two of them began to take more precautions. However, when they walked to the valley, they could see in the distance the entrance to the subdued devil ancient cave, and did not encounter any danger or attack. This land, full of wild countrysides like a ghost town, was actually deafeningly silent. Not only there wasn't any ferocious demon beasts, there was not even a trace of the poisonous insects that were rampant when they entered 10,000 great mountains. This sinister area seemed to be unexpectedly the safest place within the inhospitable 10,000 great mountains. Ghost Li and Jin Pinger stood above a small hill, surveying into the distance that ancient cave. Indistinctly they could see that stone statue erected outside the entrance. The two of them had their eyebrows pinched. They had finally arrived, but the serenity brought them greater worry. Jin Pinger pointed towards the cave and said, "That is the subdued devil ancient cave. When I pursued that black-clothed man to here, I saw it with my own eyes, the resurrection of the beast deity in this cave." Ghost Li nodded slightly, then looked around the cave surroundings, but except for the bottomless dark hole, there was nothing but sheer cliffs and strange savage rocks, and several zhongs high up above the entrance, tightly pressing against the stone walls, there was a thick layer of black cloud, slowly drifting in midair like a water cloud. Looking at that concentrated black color, it was clear without asking, it must be highly toxic. Looking with a quick glance, there was nowhere an ordinary person could go, it was a dead trap. Pulling his gaze back, Ghost Li muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Shall we enter?" Jin Pinger hesitated slightly for a moment, but in the end she nodded her head and said, "Forget it, we've come all the way here, how could we retreat, let's go." Ghost Li glanced at her, and saw Jin Pinger looking a little peculiar and slightly pale. It was clear that she had some apprehensions about that mysterious cave. In fact, she was not alone, even the monkey Xiao Wei on Ghost Li's shoulder seemed especially quiet, his usual temperament gone. As if she had felt it, Jin Pinger turned towards Ghost Li and suddenly smiled, revealing beautiful white teeth, and said, "I'm all right, let's go over." Ghost Li nodded, and headed in first. Jin Pinger followed behind, steadily towards that subdued devil ancient cave. The crunching sound of the footsteps on hard scorched black rocks were lost in the incessant whistling yin wind. As they got closer to the ancient cave, the bitingly cold wind became stronger, the sinister chill in the wind became colder. By now, the two of them have discovered that the bone-chilling yin wind blowing across the land originated from that ancient cave. As they got closer to the cave, the surrounding light seemed to gradually dim, and more of the light were blocked by the black cloud above the subdued devil ancient cave, as if this place did not permit light to enter. And the old stone statue standing at the cave entrance, facing the depths of the cave, finally became distinct to their eyes. Although this was not a very long road, but to the two of them it seemed like they had been walking for a long time. When they finally stood at the entrance of the subdued devil ancient cave, the sky had turned completely dark, and the warm sunlight shining on them had disappeared above the black cloud. Ghostly turned slowly to the entrance, stood before the stone statue of a woman's likeness. The dusky light illuminating her body. The wind and frost of the last thousands and thousands of years, slowly worn the initial soft and beautiful gloss away, to course, in the time that brought great changes to the world. How many eyes, once like this, quietly watched your face? Time moved forward like the torrential water in a long river, never once stopping for anything. The first emotions, the first memory, those countless bits and traces that once deeply engraved in your heart, turned out, in the end it would still be forgotten by humans. Leaving only the least bit trace of the legendary said, after the long passage of time, carelessly mentioned by the later generations. The beauty you once had, the former heroics you once did, before time, turned to ashes. The icy wind blew past the clothes and onto the body, the gazes within these thousands and thousands of years. Maybe, in the end it could not be compared to a moment of regret. A soft hand gently pat his shoulder, the monkey Xiao Hui's Gigi cries, rang in his ears. Startled, Ghostly jerked and took a step back, and then snapping alert, he realized he had unintentionally lost himself while gazing at the female statue. With that thought, Ghostly's back felt like it was pricked with a needle, his mind astonished. With his current level of skills, his will was resolute, and yet when he faced this Linglong witch stone statue, he had unconsciously fell to the power contained in the stone. That was no small feat. Ghostly composed himself, and turned his head to look at Jin Pinger. If it wasn't for Jin Pinger's reminder, he wouldn't know how long he would still be mesmerized. But how did Jin Pinger guard against this statue? Could it be that this lady had some unexpected and hidden strength? Ghostly turned to look, and couldn't help but be startled. Even though Jin Pinger was standing beside him and had reached out to pat his shoulder, her body was in the opposite direction, facing the entrance of the cave with her back to the status, completely ignoring the face of the statue. Ghostly frowned and asked, "What are you doing?" Jin Pinger smiled and said, "This stone statue is very powerful, didn't I tell you before?" Ghostly frowned even more, grunted and took a deep breath. At this time the Xiao Wei that was crouching on his shoulder seemed to become impatient, his tail swinging. He jumped off from Ghostly's shoulder suddenly and jumped onto the statue, and climbing a few times, finally sat down on the head of the stone statue. Ghostly's countenance changed, and he said sternly, "Xiao Wei, come here." The monkey looked at Ghostly, scratched his head and GG twice, but in the end jumped back on Ghostly's shoulder. Jin Pinger stood on the side chuckling, "Why are you scaring the monkey for? He was just playful." Jin Pinger trailed off, astonished, staring at Ghostly's solemn expression. He straightened his clothes and respectfully bowed to the stone statue. Jin Pinger asked in surprise, "What are you doing now?" Ghostly looked indifferent, did not answer, merely gazing deeply at the stone statue and cupped his hands together, before turning and said blandly, "Nothing, let's go in." The deep and serene ancient cave, gusts of yin wind, was just before them. Jin Pinger followed behind Ghostly, her gaze on the obviously bored monkey Xiao Wei, and then on Ghostly and said, "Why did you pay respects to the stone statue?" Ghostly paused in his steps, and then continued walking. He said calmly, "The demeanor of the predecessor, although had long disappeared, but in the people's hearts, there is always something worthy of respect." Jin Pinger frowned, not really understanding Ghostly's riddle, and was about to ask further, but Ghostly had approached close to the entrance. Jin Pinger caught up quickly, frowning, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Why are you walking so fast? I have not told you yet, when I was here the last time, there was a ferocious spirit. Even though most likely it would be killed by that beast deity, but this cave entrance most likely." At this, Jin Pinger's voice abruptly died, and at the same time, Ghostly's footsteps stopped. The two of them stood several kai away from the entrance of the subdued devil ancient cave, staring at the sinister dark cave. A white cold mist slowly emerged, in the bitingly strong cold yin wind, it did not show signs of dissipating. As they watched that white cold mist gathering bigger and bigger, the volume getting bigger, and finally formed, an enormous figure faintly discernible in the white cold mist. It roared, thundering and blending in with the whistling of the yin wind, becoming more powerful, like a ferocious celestial deity. Jin Pinger watched the white cold mist, sighed and shook her head. All right, now you see it, there's a very powerful and bad-tempered ferocious spirit. Chapter 199 Merits. The yin wind blew harder and harder, flapping ghostly and Jin Pinger's clothes loudly. They stood at the cave entrance, watching the spirit which was forming into its massive shape. Eyes as big as bells, abruptly opened in the white mist, faint blood-red glow revealed, the ferocious spirit's colossal body shrouded over, his eyes fell onto the two mortals below him. Who is it, dare to come to this place? The spirit's voice suddenly rang out, forceful and deafening, the surrounding mountain walls seemed to be trembling. But after a moment, the fierce spirit seemed to discover something, was startled for a moment, his eyes turned to Jin Pinger who was standing behind Ghost Li. You again? Jin Pinger smiled, her charms boundless, said, yes. It's me, we meet again. The spirit gave an angry howl, the sound echoing far, the deep cave behind it seemed to reverberate his cries. Why have you come here again? Isn't it enough that you have disturbed the goddess the last time? Jin Pinger was still contemplating on how to deal with this spirit. From that day's situation, this guardian definitely was not someone easy to deal with. Just that while she was scheming, her face was still smiling. Jin Pinger was about to speak, suddenly heard Ghost Li said, Are you the Black Tiger, one of the southern border 7 heroes who followed Linglong Shaman Lady into the 10,000 Great Mountains? Jin Pinger stunned, turned to look at Ghost Li, saw him looking solemn, watching that spirit. But almost at the same time Ghost Li asked that question, that spirit was also stunned, as if the name, Black Tiger, was like a heavy punch hitting deep within him. Even if it was a metamorphosed evil ghost ferocious spirit, even if it was abandoned by the world, thousands and thousands of years keeping watch solitary, but in the end there was still some memories hidden deep inside the hearts. Who are you? The forceful voice of the spirit suddenly turned hoarse, completely different when he first appeared. Ghost Li looked at that spirit surrounded by uncanny voice, his eyes flashed with complicated expression, slowly said, the 7 who followed Linglong Shaman Lady, in the end 5 returned and established the southern border 5 tribes which we know today. Leaving 2 who were real brothers and had been with Linglong Shaman Lady the longest, Black Tiger and Black Wood, they did not come back. The ancient shaman tribe legend said, the elder brother Black Tiger was loyal and brave, the younger brother Blackwood steadfast and dedicated. I see that you are especially reverenced towards this statue, firm and tenacious for these thousands and thousands of years, not regretting evolving into a ferocious spirit, so I guessed you were Black Tiger, is that right? That fierce spirit was silent for a long time, his eyes gazed at Ghost Li in that stare, did not show any fear, met his eyes squarely. Slowly, the white mist around the fierce spirit rose, the red color around his eyes turned darker, even the bone-penetrating chill at the entrance of the cave seemed to turn colder. Xiao Wei, who was crouching on Ghost Li's shoulder, seemed uneasy, quietly called out twice. Who exactly are you, actually know about the shaman tribe past? The fierce spirit's original angry voice seemed to change, his tone contained an inexplicable chill. Ghost Li seemed not to feel anything, only looked at the huge shadow, said, most of the world probably can't remember things that happened too long ago, just that there will still be legends after all, bit by bit passed down. He looked at the fierce spirit, word by word said, the southern border today, the descendants of the shaman tribe, there are still people who remember you. The fierce spirit's eyes closed, and for a long time did not open. Jin Pinger stood behind, her brows slightly wrinkled up, looked at the fierce spirit, and looked at Ghost Li again. These so-called ancient shaman tribe Linglong statue legends, she knew nothing of it, but looking at the reaction of the fierce spirit, apparently what Ghost Li said was actually true. All along, she assumed within the evil sect, nobody would know more about the various strange things in this 10,000 great mountain than her. Unexpectedly Ghost Li actually had secrets. She looked at that man's figure, her heart slightly in awe, her eyes instead turned colder. After a long time, the yin wind was still blowing coldly. Above their heads, the dark clouds rolled silently, the cold breeze soughing, a desolate scenery. In this silence, suddenly, that fierce spirit Black Tiger suddenly looked up, lifted his head to the sky and howled, his cries mournful, as if the countless vicissitudes of his past were all within the cries. When the cries were still reverberating faintly in the distant mountains, he had already turned his head back, the rumbling sounds, as if he was feeling agitated but in the end, still suppressed it. Thank you. That fierce spirit gazed at Ghost Lee for a long time, suddenly slightly dipped his head, and said that. Ghost Lee was expressionless, slowly retreated half a step, closed his eyes and slightly bowed, considered returning the gesture. The fierce spirit nodded his head, his tone gradually calmed down, said, I didn't expect that in this world somebody still remember our goddess and us, but when we followed Shaman Lady deep into this 10,000 great mountain, when did we once thought we would leave our names in history? The eyes of the fierce spirit slowly turned to outside of the cave, on that Linglong shaman goddess statue. His eyes, also instantly turned gentle, even his voice, seemed lighter, but coming here, I presume it is not specifically to look for me this not human nor ghost thing and tell me these words right. Ghost Lee was silent for a moment, said, yes, before I came, although I have heard about Linglong shaman lady and the 7 of you, but I did not know your current situation and I did not know you will be here. He looked up, looked at the spirit, slowly said, my reason for coming here, is because of that beast deity in this cave. The spirit's enormous figure trembled, even he was afraid of the name. However, the spirit's eyes did not look at him, instead paused on the statue, said, why are you all looking for him? Ghost Lee said indifferently, we want to find him, and then kill him. The spirit abruptly looked back, staring at Ghost Lee, slowly said, just the 2 of you. Ghost Lee slowly nodded, said, yes. The white mist shrouding the fierce spirit suddenly started to spin rapidly, making his figure blurred. After a long while, he was heard speaking coldly, that's right, the beast deity is indeed in this subdued devil ancient cave. Jin Pinger shook, a hint of delight flashed past her face. Ghost Lee however did not show any happy expression, was still looking at the fierce spirit. That fierce spirit was also looking at him, suddenly said, I see from your attire, most likely you are not from southern border, should be from central plains. Ghost Lee nodded and said, yes. The spirit pondered for a moment, in the ghostly atmosphere, he seemed to look uncertain, said, do you know, why do I guard the cave entrance? Ghost Lee said, I do not know. The spirit said, without doubt I do it to protect the goddess statue, but other than that, I am here guarding, firstly is not to allow external forces to resurrect this evildoer, secondly not to allow ignorant people into the cave and meet their deaths, can you understand? Ghost Lee nodded his head. The fierce spirit smiled bitterly, said, but in the end I am still unworthy of the goddess's great trust, was tricked by that bastard, made a serious mistake, the evildoer is resurrected, the world's living's in great misery. Quote. At the end, his voice gradually quietened down, then, the fierce spirit seemed to compose himself, said again, I have already given up all hope, thought no one in the world can stop this evildoer, unexpectedly some time ago, he returned heavily injured, the greatness of Central Plains heroes lends glory to the place, there is actually still a master who is able to injure him, it is really a shock to me. Ghost Lee's eyes slightly twitched, suddenly sneered, said, you do not have to be too mindful of it, although the beast is defeated but the person who defeated him, might not be better off. The fierce spirit was slightly taken aback, did not know what Ghost Lee meant but right now he did not bother to get to the bottom, said, to be able to eliminate the evildoer, naturally it is the best, I have this intention no less than several thousand years, only regret that at that time even though he was not yet fully awake, I too could do nothing to him. You all come from Central Plains, who knows maybe you all will be able to do it. If really succeed. The ghostly air around the spirit suddenly disappeared, with glaring eyes, he loudly said, I thank all of you here on behalf of Goddess. Having said that, he slowly shifted his body, opening a path, revealing behind him that deep bottomless cave. Ghost Lee glanced into the depths of the cave, turned to look deeply at the fierce spirit was also staring at him. Ghost Lee slowly nodded, did not speak, slowly walked in. When he passed by the fierce spirit, Xiao Wei suddenly lifted its head, curiously looked at the spirit, its 3 eyes blinked continuously. The spirit suddenly spoke loudly to the back figure of Ghost Lee, there is one more thing, you must be careful. The beast deity did not return alone, other than that vicious Teoti beside him, there is still another evildoer, highly skilled, you must be very careful. Ghost Lee paused, said, as far as I know, his underlings 13 demon beasts, have all been annihilated. The fierce spirit shook his head, not one of the 13 demon beasts, before this, even I have not seen that evildoer before, you must be careful. Ghost Lee slowly nodded, continued down into the cave. Following which, Jin Pinger also slowly followed up, the 2 figures and a monkey, slowly descended into the darkness, wavering forward in the depths of the shadows, slowly and finally disappeared. The spirit's body ghostly air, gradually blurred, but his huge eyes kept staring at the darkness in the depths of the cave. Suddenly, at that deepest darkness, he suddenly issued a deafening roar, like huge waves toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. Even the chilling yin wind flowed backwards, the extremely hard rock walls rumbled loudly, like the sky was crashing and earth quaking. In that raging wild roar, the fierce spirit's huge body slowly submerged into the darkness. But, when the fierce spirit disappeared at the same time, he did not notice, outside the entrance, behind that statue, a black human figure. It was that person who instigated the southern border 5 tribes' internal strife, snatched back the 5 tribes' sacred weapons, resulting in the resurrection of the beast deity, Blackwood. The black and loose robe as usual enveloped his entire body, emanating chill air, but his eyes was glimmering with complicated feelings, looking at the cave. When the fierce spirit, who was also once his brother, disappeared, he slowly looked away, once again, looked at that Linglong shaman lady's statue. In the rustling yin wind, he seemed to be also mumbling, "Goddess." At the same time, far from the burnt black mountain summit where the cave was, in that vast black forest, a team of more than a dozen people slowly walked out. The first one was in white like frost, an extremely beautiful-looking lady, in her hand a blue Tianya celestial sword, her face like clear frost, her eyes yet contained an inexplicable distress and vicissitudes of life, silently gazing towards this black burnt mountain summit. Central Plains, 30 miles outside Heyong City. On the main road, after so long, most of the refugees had returned to their southern hometown. The place here was not far from the foot of Qingyun Hill, yet could still see shabbily attired commoners trudging with difficulty. But during which, there were more small business and hawkers set up. Compared to the catastrophe which occurred several months ago, it was very much better. Immortal giving pointers, come read your remaining life's fate. Suddenly, a loud cry rang out, breaking the silence here. It was especially piercing. Fortune, career, luck in government official, marriage, whereabouts, geomancy, physiognomy, glyphomancy, fortune from feeling the bones, all-knowing, come, only 5 silvers per person. It is already cheap. Zhou Yixian holding the Immortal Guide, signed bamboo pole, strided over, shouting along the way, not one did not glance over. Wild Dog Taoist who was behind him did not speak, as usual carrying all the luggage. Xiao Huan was instead stunned, lifted her head up from the wordless black cover book which she had been carefully reading during the journey, asked in surprised, "Grandpa, what did you just say, how many silvers per person?" Zhou Yixian turned, he smiled, Taoist immortal-like demeanor, stretched out 5 fingers, solemnly said, 5 silvers. Xiao Huan frowned, said, "But yesterday you called out 3 silvers. Also, what exactly is with you these days? 3 days ago we were still fine like in the past, each customer 5 copper, but you have the nerve, these few days you leapt and jumped rising up, 5 coppers increasing to 1 silver, after 1 day to 2 silvers, yesterday it became 3 silvers, today you simply directly ask for 5 silvers. Xiao Huan walked to Zhou Yixian, assessed him carefully up and down. Zhou Yixian felt unnerved by her, stepped back and made a dry cough, said, "You little lass, what are you looking at?" Xiao Huan ignored him, stretched out her hand and felt his forehead. Zhou Yixian was startled, stepped back and made way, said, "What are you doing behaving so oddly?" Xiao Huan pay a cry, said, "You are the one behaving oddly. I am checking if you are having a fever, your brain's fried muddled." Then she turned to Wild Dog Taoist, asked, "Priest, you say, is my grandfather muddle-headed recently?" Because it was in the day, Wild Dog Taoist was as usual, his face wrapped up in cloth, but his 2 eyes sparkling, extremely bright. At the moment asked a question by Xiao Huan, he laughed twice, and then immediately nodded and said, I mean senior is aged, it is inevitable." "Bullshit." Zhou Yixian ahead jumped up, furious. Xiao Huan rolled her eyes at him, said, "Grandpa, what are you so agitated for? I think what priest said is very reasonable, looking at your behavior these days, I'm afraid you are really somehow senile." Zhou Yixian seemed particularly sensitive about senile, these 3 words. He was even more infuriated, angrily said, "What do you 2 know about, how old are both of you only, how much do you know about the ways of the world, I do all these isn't it too?" Xiao Huan cut in, "Is it? Then tell us, why are you desperately raising the prices?" Zhou Yixian snorted, waved the bamboo pole, pointed towards the sparsely populated pedestrians, said, "Look at these people, and the people that we encountered along the way, are they all refugees?" Xiao Huan nodded her head, said, "That's right, everyone is. Including us too." Zhou Yixian stifled a moment, his old face slightly red, then acted as he did not hear it. Xiao Huan said, since they are refugees, away from their hometowns, I think no one actually wants to read their fortunes. I was thinking if we should lower the price, but Grandpa, you have the nerve, desperately increasing the price. Zhou Yixian placed his hands behind the bamboo pole at his back, sneered, according to what you say, I'd be wrong, but you look at these days, those that came to read their fortunes, did their numbers increase or decrease? Xiao Huan was taken aback for a moment, frowned. Wild Dog Taoist instead interrupted, said, speaking of it, it seems that the number of people reading their fortunes really increased. Zhou Yixian grunted again, a conceited look on his face, spoke to Xiao Huan, you with your young age, what do you know? Let me tell you, it goes without saying in a catastrophe, everyone leave their homes, they might not have the intention to read their fortunes. But this time it is very different, the magnitude of this catastrophe is not seen for 10,000 years, the world in utter misery, everyone defensive, who would know if we will be alive tomorrow? In this unusual situation, with me this immortal showing them the path, wouldn't all rush like ducks? Xiao Huan bowed her head and pondered, after a long time, slowly shook her and sighed, a frustrated look on her face. Wild Dog Taoist was still confused, could not help but said, then why are you still increasing the price? Zhou Yixian's eyes rolled, said, this kind of profound knowledge, how can I teach you? Wild Dog Taoist met with a rebuff, stammered and retreated. Xiao Huan sighed and said, this I understand more or less now. Wild Dog Taoist and Zhou Yixian were surprised. Zhou Yixian said, oh, try explaining it. Xiao Huan shrugged her shoulders, lightly said, nothing more than you expecting the world to be in a panic, couldn't manage their own lives, let alone cherishing material things. On the contrary, the higher you raise your price, the commoners will instead believe that this person's skills is profound, extraordinary. I guessed, these actually I don't believe it all along, thought these kind of small tricks, even an idiot will be able to tell, unexpectedly there are still so many people believing it. Zhou Yixian shook his head and said, you are wrong, Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan was stunned, said, what? Zhou Yixian said, you are right at the front but the last sentence, it is not that they can't tell, just that they can't get over it. Wild Dog Taoist beside him was confused, said, can't get over what? Zhou Yixian glanced at the people walking haltingly around them, said, the world's common people, how would they all be foolish, just that at life and death critical juncture, how many refuse to believe in themselves, would rather listen to others even if it is just comfort. I give them pointers, the words spoken are mostly about their future and later half of their lives, will be much better than today's situation. With such words, they pay out silvers and also feel at ease. Xiao Huan suddenly said, Grandpa, do you really tell from physiognomy, or making wild guesses? Zhou Yixian smiled and said, I am making wild guesses. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist looked at each other, unable to speak. Zhou Yixian looked at the sky, looked at the vast firmament, watching for a long time. He leisurely said, such catastrophe, there may be one but not two, otherwise even heaven will not tolerate it. He then turned back and smiled and said, that being the case, the future days of course will be very much better than today's uncertain survival, so I am not considered to be lying. On the contrary, old man me along the way, comforted and advised countless of displaced citizens, we don't know how many with my words, regain a lease of life again, ashes burn once more, such merit, how can it be achieved by those monks and Taoist priests who chant scriptures all day long in the temple? He stretched his hand and patted Xiao Huan's head, a celestial look. Awe-inspiring righteousness, appearing very much like a great old man's feelings of salvation and bemoaning the state of the universe, pitying the fate of mankind, tragically going down hell by himself to save the world. Even though receiving so much shining white silvers, it was also the cardinal principles of righteousness, unable to save people if he did not collect. After collecting it was even more the vicissitudes of righteousness from the act of boundless compassion and mercy. He then sighed and said, life is really lonely. For a moment there was no voices, a blanket of silence. Zhou Yixian brows wrinkled, looked away from the sky, and looked around. Hey, you two, why are you walking so fast for? Chapter 200 Real Fury. Qingyun Mountain, Tongtian Peak. In the Crystal Hall, the past solemn and majestic scene seemed to change on this day. Flurry of footsteps were heard inside and outside of the hall incessantly, suppressed yet panicked whispers spread out like water ripples. In the distant, there even seemed to be a racket, this would never be imagined happening at Tongtian Peak, and listening to it right now, the racket seemed to be getting louder and approaching towards Tongtian Peak. Crystal Hall was situated at high ground, towering above the sea of clouds. Even if passed through the Rainbow Bridge, going up from the stone stairs beside the Jade Pool, it would still be a distance, but from the volume of the din, most likely they had went up more than half of the stairs. The oldest branch Tongtian Peak's most senior disciple Xiao Yikai heard the news and rushed over. Escorted by a few junior disciples, he strutted into Crystal Hall. For some reason on his dashing face, revealed tiredness, not knowing what could made this highly skilled outstanding talent of Qingyun sect younger generation spend so much effort and energy. But although he looked tired, once he entered the great hall, it was still a solemn face. His brows frowning, slightly angry, said, "What is it? Isn't there enough trouble yet? Who is it so daring, actually making so much noise here?" At the side, the few young disciples who were keeping guard at the great hall entrance, hurried over. Ever since after the battle with the beast deity, Reverend Daozan had been in seclusion, and his temper strangely turned eccentric. All of the affairs in Tongtian Peak were mostly handled by this very popular big senior brother. In the younger disciples' eyes, they were very much in awe of him. But at the moment the din was getting louder, all of the younger disciples instead looked odd. One of them came forward, suppressed his voice and said, "Xiao senior brother, Su teacher uncle from Big Bamboo Valley is here." Xiao Yikai was nonplussed, asked in surprise, "Suru Su teacher uncle?" The group all nodded. Xiao Yikai said, "What is she doing here? Since she is here, why didn't anyone report it and instead create such a racket?" Before he could finish, the din outside the hall suddenly spiked, as if someone finally lost his patience. A clear whistle was heard from far, like a phoenix cry, carefree and leisurely. Xiao Yikai's expression changed, hurriedly walked to the door, while speaking, "This is bad, let's go quickly. Wait, Sao junior brother, you junior brother, both of you immediately go to the backyard, invite the few teacher uncles to come over and persuade Su teacher uncle, we are all juniors, not appropriate to speak, quickly go." The two young disciples beside him quickly nodded, turned and ran to the back of the hall. Xiao Yikai walked with big steps to the entrance, looking about to reach. The clear whistle suddenly became urgent, making sharp noise. Xiao Yikai's face turned white, his figure in a flash drifted to the entrance, at the same time raised his voice and deeply shouted, "Su teacher uncle, let's talk it out, please don't." Before he could finish, he suddenly heard "Iya, Iyo" sounds. Xiao Yikai's body paused and stiffened. Outside the entrance, under the image of the warm and bright blue sky, Hu Tong, several human figures fell in from outside. Not one could stand upright, each turning non-stopped. After a moment Lala fell together onto the ground. The crystal hall was in an uproar. "Hey!" A cold snort, a slim figure was seen, quietly appeared at the entrance. It was Suru. This sound instantly stunned the entire hall. In the huge crystal hall, there was not a sound. Everyone's stares, all gathered onto that lady who displayed her powers. Glossy black hair bunned up, inserted with a golden phoenix with red jade eyes in flight hairpin. 3 pieces of glass jade bells dangled from the phoenix mouth, gently wavering. 2 graceful eyebrows, beautiful yet cold, pure and even more charming. Red lips tightly closed, cheeks like snow, a pair of eyes extremely clear and bright, carried 30% of anger. The usual loose attire was gone. Right now Suru in plain white clothes, tightly wrapped her body, less charming but more animated. At the same time her hands was clutching a dark green celestial sword sheath, the sword shining, although the scabbard was covering it, but the layers of sword energy, invisible yet diffusing, made one feel that this sword was spiritual, about to leap out and dance. Xiao Yikai's eyes twitched a few times, subconsciously felt a chill behind his back. Suru's face was like frost, her eyes cold, swept over the crowd at the hall. That glimpse, although the face was beautiful but no one dared to meet her gaze. Xiao Yikai glanced sideways at those younger disciples who were groaning and slowly getting up from the ground, although they had some bruises but all were minor injuries, not to mention tendons or bones, even blood was rare. This glance made his heart calm down much. Seemed like although Suru's teacher uncle for some reason erupted in fury but in the end still cherished her relationship with the sect and did not hit out hard, if not according to those elders idle talk about, that woman was really powerful, these junior brothers would have suffered more. However, even though it was so, Xiao Yikai's eyes suddenly turned cold. Suru's eyes in the end fell on him. Xiao Yikai made a dry laugh, took a step, cupped his hands together and bowed, while secretly glanced at the dark green sword in her hand, said, "This. Su teacher uncle, why are you so free today? Come to visit our Tongtian Peak." Suru coldly looked at Xiao Yikai, coldly snorted, simply ignored Xiao Yikai's questions, showed no intention of return Xiao Yikai's greeting too, still standing proudly there, her face like frost, coldly said, "Done with the nonsense, go and call Dao Zan out here." Once the words were said, a stir immediately went through the Tong Tien Peak disciples which nearly numbered 100 in the hall. Xiao Yikai's countenance also changed, stunned for a long while, said, "Su teacher uncle, has something happened? Teacher has always been in seclusion. Oh right, where is Tien teacher uncle? Why did he not come with you?" It was better if he did not mention Tien Buyi. Once he said it, Suru's face immediately changed, the expressions on her face changed constantly, 30% sorrow, 30% anxiety, and even more 30% anger and a trace of murderous cold air. Roar. Suddenly, a low roar like a wild beast cry, came from this crystal hall. Everyone was surprised, and then discovered, this sound actually came from that strange dark green sword in Suru's hand. Suru's 5 fingers were white from clutching the sword, the slender knuckles were even whiter from lack of blood, as if it had sensed something. The sword's bright glow, at the moment, turned brighter, made a sound like a beast roar. This sword's momentum vigorous and forceful, fiery and unyielding, in Suru's hands, who seemed gentle and amiable usually, did not seem incompatible at all, instead like a tiger that had grown wings, increasing the murderous aura. Xiao Yikai subconsciously stepped back, his scalp tingling, but did not know what he had said wrong, and of all people this was his own senior teacher uncle, and her husband Tien Buyi was Qingyun sect highly esteemed Big Bamboo leader, no matter what this was not someone he could offend easily. Accordingly, Suru trespassing Crystal Hall, was already made a big offense, but looking at her, there was no sign of fear, clearly a look that not only wanted to make trouble but wanted to make it into a big one. In the dark green sword strange and deep roars, Suru facing Xiao Yikai, drawled word by word, "Call Dao Zan out, I want to question him properly, what did he do to Buyi exactly?" Xiao Yikai's was shocked, suddenly looked up, an instant deafening silence in the hall. Then at this time, suddenly a flurry of hurried footsteps were heard from the back of the hall, a haggard old voice was heard from afar, "Su junior sister, has something happened to Buyi junior brother? Let's talk it over, we are all Qingyun sect, you must not be rash." Following that voice, several elders came out in a single file from the back of the hall, the first 2, one with black hair, the other in white, at the same time with white beard. However, that haggard voice belonged to the person with black hair. As for the white-beard elder, it was the Fan elder, who was the arbitrator for Qingyun Hill 7 branches martial arts competition when Zhang Xiaofan was still there. These few decades, Qingyun sect experienced 2 great wars, the older generation of elders, either dead or injured, not much of them left. Suru looked at the old men who were walking over, frowned, snorted but showed no sign of stepping down. The white-bearded old man Fan elder glanced at Suru, coughed once, his mouth was instead muttering a few words. Next to him, the black hair elder glanced around, saw several of the disciples in bruises, he frowned, was about to talk to Suru. Suru instead coldly said to that Fan elder, "Fan senior brother, are you scolding me quietly?" Fan elder stared at by her, turned red but immediately shook his head, No, Su junior sister, I have with you and Tien junior brother many years of friendship, I can't wait to admire you, how would I scold you?" The black hair elder turned and glanced at Fan elder, frowned. Fan elder made a dry laugh, gestured and said, "Yang senior brother, you say. The person with black hair whom was addressed as Yang senior brother, turned his head around, facing Suru said, "Su junior sister, all right, cool down first, what is happening exactly, tell the details to me. You are usually a careful and gentle person, why is it today you did this that even Tien junior brother might not even dare to do it?" Suru's face was still cold, but that sword beside her seemed to weaken slightly, did not make the deep strange roars. Everyone quietly heaved a sigh of relief. When Suru was holding the sword and standing there, the force of the power really made the Qingyun disciples tremble with fear. Suru looked at Yang elder, her lips twitched, sneered, "What Buyi dare not do, doesn't mean I will not. I want to see Dao Zan, call him out." Several elders looked at each other. After a while, Yang elder coughed, said, "Su junior sister, sect head senior brother has been in seclusion for many days, it is really inconvenience for him to appear, why don't you first say what is it that makes you so angry? And, what happened to Tien junior brother, why is he not with you?" Suru frowned, her delicate and beautiful face increased with 30% of obstination and anger, saying loudly, "Isn't he detained by you all Tong Tien Peak?" Once she said those words, Yang elder, Fan Elder and everyone on Tongtian Peak were shocked. Young Elder quickly said, Su Junior sister, you must not speak carelessly. Tian Junior brother is one of Qing Yun's 7 branches leaders. In our sect, other than Reverend Dao Zan senior brother, he and Zeng Shuchong Zeng senior brother are the most highly regarded. Furthermore, everyone are fellow disciples. Where would there be detained such thing? Definitely not. Suru sneered, sternly said, don't think that we do not know what happened to Dao Zan. It is precisely because we know the implications. Bu Yi then took the risk and went up to talk to him. But until present, there is no news. Who do I look for if not you all? Young Elder was stunned. Fan Elder, who was standing beside, turned to Xiao Yi Kai said, Xiao nephew, Big Bamboo Valley leader Tian Bu Yi, has he visited Tongtian Peak recently? Xiao Yi Kai shook his head at a loss, said, no, disciple has always been responsible for Tongtian Peak's affairs, but within these few months, Tian teacher uncle really did not inform us that he was coming to Tongtian Peak. Suru glanced at Fan Elder, coldly said, what do you think he was coming here for? Still would submit invitation for visitation, slowly enjoying his tea while waiting. Fan Elder turned red, did not speak. Young Elder was already speaking to Xiao Yi Kai, Xiao nephew, since so, go immediately to Founder's Ancestral Hall and ask sect head senior brother, if it's possible, best if he could come here, speaking before everyone, we will all understand. Xiao Yi Kai hesitated for a moment, nodded his head and said, yes, I will go now. After speaking, he turned and quickly walked to the back hall, with big steps. Young Elder watched Xiao Yi Kai disappeared, turned and smiled and said, Su Junior sister, I know you and your husband have deep affections, couldn't help but your mind in a tangle due to your worries, but this time recklessly forcing your way in Tongtian Peak, this is really a little too much. Suru was silent for a moment, lightly said, Young senior brother, you are right, if it is true that Bu Yi is fine, and it is only me over-imagining, Suru will receive Qing Yun sect punishment. Young Elder waved his hand, smiled and said, look at you, I do not mean that. Suru suddenly switched the topic, cut in and spoke with curt finality. But if it is true that something happened to Bu Yi here, young senior brother, her clear bright eyes glimmered, a glint brushed past, her words reflecting her worries and agitation, without wavering or leaving room for repent, then Qing Yun sect for the past 2,000 years, would have an unfilial disciple Suru, for the person that she missed and worries, on this Qing Yun sect Tongtian Peak, to the generations of ancestors, to that famous sect head senior brother, demand justice. A light shout, she waved her hand like knife, piercing the air, the dark green sword light instantly surged, a sharp sound broke out and followed by a muffled sound, dust flew, everyone only felt the ground below shaking slightly, like an earthquake. Until the dust settled down, they saw the sword in Suru's hand, together with the sheath struck into the solid sturdy rock floor in the center of the hall, and the surrounding ground, did not have a single trace of crack. Mysteriously, the dark green sword in the ground, although left Suru's hand but sword's power was even stronger, like a wild beast tasting blood, again growled. That young elder looked at the sword which was embedded before him and Suru, smiled bitterly and said, Su Junior sister, this has yet to reach that stage, isn't it? Why did you even bring out the ink snow, which has been sealed up for 100 over years? Suru sneered, young senior brother, you know it was Bu Yi who wanted me to seal up this ink snow, because with him around, sealing it, I too do not give a damn. But if something happened to him, I will use this ink snow, to seek guidance from sect head senior brother. Young elder shook his head and made a wry smile, said, I thought you being married to Tian junior brother for so many years, would have changed your temper long ago. Forget it, anyway I am unable to talk you out, we better go over and wait together for Xiao Yi Kai to invite sect head senior brother. Suru was expressionless but snorted, and slowly walked to the side with young elder and sat down. In the crystal hall, the atmosphere slowly eased down, young elder beside lowered his voice, spoke to Suru, probably still trying to comfort her not to be too rushed. The other elders either stood behind young elder or also sat down, only Fan elder took his time and walked to the entrance, staying far from Suru. As for the other younger disciples, their status low, including Suru's anger, each one standing further and further away. Among the Tongtian Peak elders, Fan elder was the most easygoing. People also found him funny and humorous, although his cultivation inevitably was lacking as compared to the other elders, but among the younger disciples, he was the most popular, whether towards his own disciples or other nephews, were all very close. At this time everyone saw Fan elder standing aside by himself. Many of the younger disciples quietly went over, among them some whom were knocked down by Suru and also his own disciples. Fan Elder looked at the few disciples, shook his head. A young disciple could not help but asked in a small voice, "Teacher, that Suru teacher uncle, why is she so fierce? Usually she is very gentle, why is it that when she is so fierce she is this powerful?" Fan Elder with his white beard rolled his eyes at the disciple, with a "hate" sound, blew his beard, said, "You fellows only just joined Qing Yun sect, what do you know? When that woman was being shrewish at that time, there was nothing she can't do." The young disciples who were slowly surrounding him, every one of them absorbed in listening, someone softly exclaimed, "Ah! Really can't tell. Suru teacher uncle with such beauty, must be a reigning beauty at that time." Fan Elder hate laughed, secretly glanced at Suru and young elder. They were talking, clearly did not notice the young disciples, and so felt bold and said, "Speaking of it, she was also considered to be the most famous among our generation of female disciples, like, he nodded, suddenly revealed a mysterious smile, whispered, like that Lu Shui-chi from Small Bamboo Valley." The disciples all around made an "ah" sound, all looked like they comprehended, each nodding, showing that they understood Fan Elder's meaning. Fan Elder, with hundreds responding to a single call, couldn't help but feel conceited, said, "Actually, to speak of it at the beginning, although her skills was not bad, but there were others who were stronger, like Dao Zhan's senior brother and Wan's senior brother. They are all rare talents for 1,000 years, naturally were stronger than her. Just that because she was young and beautiful, including she has her teacher Zhenyu the great teacher as backing, nobody dared to mess with her, therefore she dared to create trouble everywhere. I still remember, when she was making a mess in Qing Yun sect just by herself, including that almost as fierce as her, the mother tiger Shui Yu, stinky boy, why are you hitting me, be well behaved, I have not finished." Fan Elder excitedly continued, "At that time that Shui Yu, why are all of your expressions like this? I know, you all don't understand who I am referring to. Actually it is that Small Bamboo Valley Shui Yu master. She is Suru's senior sister, at that time with that aggressive temperament, was the same as Suru, famous in our sect. Hey, stinky boy, why do you keep pulling me? I tell you, I am still your teacher, don't be so rude. Where was I? Oh, I remembered, speaking about Shui Yu. That Suru at that time, although was shrewd, did all kinds of things, but ever since she married Big Bamboo Valley Tien Buyi, she seemed to turn into another person, just like what you all see. The few of us elders actually felt very strange, but it is still a good thing in the end. But speaking about that Shui Yu, she did not change the slightest. How fierce she was at that time, she is still that fierce, even the disciples under her, for example that Lu Shui-chi that you all like the best, almost identical to her at that time, seeing a ghost." Fan Elder whipped his body around, angrily said, "Stinky boy, why do you keep pulling me? You have not have a beating for a long time, your skin is feeling itchy, is it?" His words suddenly cut off, mouth slightly ajar, saw the circle of disciples with their heads bowed standing aside, silent and motionless. Outside the door, Shui Yu master looking indifferent, coldly stood there watching Fan Elder. At her side, Wen Min was also looking at Fan Elder, but it was a look of anger. Fan Elder's forehead instantly was full of sweat, his old face all red, stepped back a few steps, extremely embarrassed, kept forcing a smile. Shui Yu master slowly walked in, but she no longer looked at Fan Elder, instead it was Wen Min who was reluctant, hatefully glared at him. Fan Elder among Qing Yun elders, had always been well known for talking too much, this time being caught on the spot, it was extremely embarrassing. But Suru and young elder clearly did not know what was happening over here. Suru saw Shui Yu master, a trace of surprise on her face, said, "Senior sister, why are you here?" Shui Yu master slightly frowned, looked around and said, "I would like to ask you first. You are not at Big Bamboo Valley, why are you here alone? If there is anything, it should be Tien Buyi to come, why are you here?" Suru's mouth moved, watching her senior sister, suddenly her heart pained, her eyes turned red. Shui Yu master was stunned, a uneasy feeling in her heart, saw young elder beside, young elder shook his head and forced a smile, but did not know where to start. Shui Yu master felt slightly anxious, she grew up with Suru, the depth of their friendship was definitely not ordinary, like real sisters. This time watching Suru like something serious had happened, she was even more worried. Suddenly she saw the dark green sword in the ground, ink snow, the shock was even more. When she was asked to ask more, suddenly hurried footsteps from the rear hall sounded, Xiao Yikai like a whirlwind swept in, a panic look rarely seen on his face. Something happened, something happened. Everyone was shocked. Suru, like being struck by thunderbolt, felt a honked sound in her mind, spinning her around. That worry which had been eating at her, almost felt like bursting, but she felt blackness before her eyes, almost fainted. Shui Yu master caught hold of the pale-faced Suru, turned to Xiao Ye Kai and shouted, "What is it? Say it clearly."